There's no job for someone with such low education. What can a person without any real learning do? My boss laughed mockingly at me, a woman who grew up in a single-parent household. I had been putting in hard work all this time, driven by the memory of my mom who had raised me alone. He never acknowledged my efforts and even belittled my mom. When my mom passed away, my boss not only spoke cold words but also undermined me. I'm Sarah, a 28-year-old woman working in a small to medium-sized business, raised by a single parent. I joined the company right after high school as a part-timer and now work here full-time. Despite the company being relatively small, it employs a significant number of people. Initially starting as a part-timer, I fought hard as if my life depended on it. Thanks to my dedication, I earned recognition from my boss and became a full-time employee in my 3rd year. Even after becoming full-time, I continued to work diligently, not wanting to disappoint those who believed in me. By age 25, I was handling more responsibilities than my peers and gaining trust within the company. With decent pay and bonuses, I could take care of my mom and live comfortably. One day, my direct boss retired and a new boss, Christopher, was assigned. It was sad to part with the boss who had nurtured and recognized me. I felt a slight anxiety about getting along with the new boss, but my hard work spoke for itself. Above all, my retiring boss assured me he would speak highly of me to the new boss, easing my worries. On Christopher's first day, I was called into a conference room, expecting to discuss our working relationship. Instead, Christopher threw unexpected words at me. Are you Taylor, the high school graduate from a single-parent household who started part-time and worked your way up? It shocked me to be confronted with my background out of nowhere. Christopher's tone was intimidating, judgmental. My first impression of this new boss was not favorable, but knowing we would work together, I aimed to keep things professional. Yes, I am Taylor. I look forward to working with you, I replied with a smile, trying to deflect the comment. Uncertain about Christopher's character, I resolved to handle the situation calmly. However, Christopher continued with unkind remarks. A single-parent upbringing, huh? You probably can't handle this job. You didn't even go to college. What can an uneducated person like you do? I was taken aback by his harsh words. I was stunned. It was true that I came from a single-parent household and had only graduated from high school, but I had consistently performed well in my department. I may not have a higher education, but I've been delivering results in my job, I told Christopher. I have a high school diploma, but I believe my work speaks for itself. I acknowledge my limitations, but I am still achieving good results, I explained to Christopher. I noticed that, however, your previous boss seemed to favor you quite a bit, he said with a crude, lecherous look. Perhaps you used some seductive tactics to get ahead. Christopher's baseless accusations stunned me. That's not true. My previous boss mentored me to help me perform my job better. There was nothing inappropriate, I insisted, feeling insulted by Christopher's insinuations about someone who had supported and guided me. I couldn't comprehend why Christopher would attack me so harshly, but it seemed to be his nature. The prospect of working under such a boss troubled me deeply. Christopher smirked at me, making it clear he didn't hold me in high regard. Despite his disdain, I resolved to prove myself. From what I've heard, this boss believes in meritocracy, I thought. If I could demonstrate my value to him, there would be no grounds for further criticism. Feeling there was no other recourse, I decided to turn Christopher's bias into motivation and redouble my efforts. As I returned to the office from fieldwork, Christopher immediately accosted me with raised voice. Hey, where have you been? He barked. I was out on scheduled fieldwork today, I replied, perplexed by his aggression. Ignoring my explanation, Christopher marched over. You're incompetent at your job. Just do these menial tasks. Organize these documents, he commanded, thrusting a towering stack of papers into my hands. It wasn't my responsibility, and I was pressed for time, but I couldn't disobey. Reluctantly, I began sorting through the documents under Christopher's satisfied gaze. Perhaps sensing my compliance, he began heaping more administrative duties on me from that day forward. Whenever I attempted to focus on my core responsibilities, Christopher accused me of neglecting tasks or chastised me for minor errors. He even belittled me, saying, "You can't handle this because you're from a single-parent household." Until then, my job satisfaction stemmed from delivering results and earning recognition within the company. I had been managing to support Mom and myself without complaint, but now the stress was overwhelming every single day. Quitting my job would worry Mom, and I couldn't bear that thought. So, despite my desperation, I continued working diligently. Then one day, Mom approached me with a request. Despite my financial support, she didn't intend to depend on me forever. Considering my future marriage prospects, she wanted to contribute and save some money for herself. I couldn't refuse her, so I approached the company. Luckily, they were hiring an office worker at the time, which seemed like a perfect fit, unrelated to my department. Hoping to avoid dealing with my difficult boss, I arranged an interview for Mom, and she was successfully hired. Mom began her new role as an office worker at the same company where I worked. She found joy in the comfortable environment, enjoying her daily routine. However, a week after she started, Christopher called me aside. "Your mom got hired as an office worker," he sneered. "Is that short woman the one who raised you, the uneducated idiot?" Christopher always wore a disdainful expression, mocking not just me but now my mom too. I couldn't fathom how he knew about Mom's employment without my mention. The stress I felt more than doubled. Hearing Mom spoken ill of hurt more than any insult directed at myself. Above all, I worried endlessly about whether Christopher would confront Mom directly. I didn't want Mom to feel distressed, but contrary to my concerns, everything seemed to be going smoothly with her at work. Christopher occasionally made snide remarks, but Mom, a strong woman who raised me single-handedly, seemed unfazed. She brushed off Christopher's comments like a child's insults, laughing them off. Witnessing her resilience relieved me. She appeared unaffected by Christopher's attempts to unsettle her. Even after that incident, Mom continued to thrive in her new workplace environment, paying no mind to Christopher's remarks. Then, one day, everything changed abruptly when Mom collapsed and had to be rushed to the hospital by ambulance. Thankfully, her life was not in danger, but she needed hospitalization for some time. I decided to take time off from work to care for Mom during her recovery. When I informed Christopher of my situation, his reaction was outrageous. "You plan to take time off for something so trivial? You must not take your job seriously," he scoffed, denying my request for leave. "I'll use the paid leave that I haven't taken yet. I'm the only one available to care for Mom," I asserted, despite Christopher's objections. Permission for the leave had already been granted by someone higher up than Christopher, who understood the gravity of the situation and supported my decision to be with Mom during this critical time. I had rarely taken leave before, but no matter how I explained it, Christopher wouldn't listen. "It's not about that. Just leave an old woman whose life is short anyway," he callously remarked. His thoughtless comment made my blood boil. How could he say something like that when I was telling him about Mom collapsing? I had endured his behavior until now, but I reached my breaking point. "I can't work under someone like you anymore," I blurted out, unable to hold back any longer. I knew it might inconvenience others, but since Christopher had arrived, I'd been relegated to menial tasks. With no motivation left, I quit on the spot despite Christopher's surprised attempt to dissuade me. "You don't have to go that far," he said, fearful of the consequences of my resignation, but my decision was final. With enough savings to sustain myself for a while, I ignored Christopher's protests and focused on caring for Mom. After things settled down with Mom's care, I considered re-entering the workforce. While I initially thought about returning to similar work, my confidence had grown. Inspired by lessons in business management from my retired former boss, I took a bold step. I started my own company. I wanted to wait until things stabilized before telling Mom about my new venture. About a year passed, and my company was starting to find its footing when Mom's health suddenly deteriorated, requiring hospitalization once again. Balancing the responsibilities of caring for Mom and running my business was challenging, but I managed without taking any time for myself. Another year passed, and the company was thriving, offering reassurance of its stability. Though Mom's health hadn't improved, I wanted to ease her worries and planned to discuss it with her soon. Then suddenly Mom passed away. It felt unreal. A truly unexpected event. As her only child, I had no other family to rely on, so I had to quickly prepare to say goodbye. Suppressing my tears, I made necessary arrangements. Despite not having worked long as a clerk, many people from the company where Mom was well-liked offered to attend her funeral. Perhaps it was Mom's warm personality that drew them, but their presence was a comfort. On the day of the funeral, more people came than I had anticipated, a testament to Mom's popularity. Amid the pain of losing her, I felt pride seeing how many lives Mom had touched. However, as the funeral was concluding, one attendee caught my attention. "Long time no see. So that old woman finally kicked the bucket, huh?" I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw Christopher standing there, his words infuriating. Though he may have had some prior interaction with Mom, I hadn't invited him to the funeral and couldn't fathom why he had come. I would never have invited someone like him to Mom's funeral. My old boss smirked at my stunned expression, the same disdainful look he wore when belittling our single-parent household. Unpleasant memories flooded back, and I could only glare at Christopher. Approaching me, Christopher handed over a bunch of flowers. "Here, some flowers. She may not have been able to give her daughter a proper education, but at least I can do this much." His words cut deep, delivered at such an inappropriate moment. I wanted to yell in anger but restrained myself. I couldn't let Christopher spoil Mom's funeral or inconvenience the other mourners. With a heavy heart, I accepted the flowers in silence. To my disbelief, the flowers looked like they had been hastily picked off the street. Had Christopher come all this way just to mock me like this? As Christopher saw my expression, his grin widened maliciously. That moment, my suppressed emotions erupted. I couldn't remain silent after hearing such disrespect toward my beloved Mom. "If this is how you truly feel about me, then I understand. In that case, I'll have to cancel our business deal with your company." Christopher stared blankly, clearly perplexed. "Deal? What are you talking about?" My former boss looked clueless, so I calmly explained the implications of my words. I had been asked by colleagues and seniors in the sales department to sign numerous contracts, though I want to terminate them all. "I need to reconsider our relationship with a company that employs someone like you," I declared firmly. Initially, my former boss didn't take me seriously. However, the next day, he sent a formal notice to Christopher's company. Christopher's face went pale upon receiving it. He clearly hadn't expected that I had started a successful business. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Christopher came to apologize promptly. I'm sorry," he muttered, his apology lacking sincerity. My anger simmered. "Sorry? Do you think that's enough? You insulted my mom while she was alive, gave me only menial tasks, and what about the funeral?" I continued, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Christopher appeared speechless while the president accompanying him apologized deeply. "I am so sorry for not intervening," he said, tears welling in his eyes. His genuine remorse touched me deeply, considering how much he had supported me in the past. Out of respect for the president and his sincere apology, I decided to reconsider continuing the business relationship. As we discussed next steps, Christopher visibly relaxed. "I'm relieved. Let's let bygones be bygones and move forward together," Christopher said with an awkward smile, extending his hand for a handshake. His assumption of reconciliation was premature. "You're fired, Christopher," the president announced abruptly, shocking us all. "What? Fired? Why?" I apologized, and we're continuing the deal, Christopher protested, disbelief written all over his face. The president remained resolute. "I've decided to terminate your employment knowing I will not continue this business relationship under these terms. I agreed to proceed only out of respect for the president. I want you to understand, I will never forgive you, no matter what you say," I asserted firmly. Christopher fell silent, visibly affected by my words. "It's the consequence of your own actions," the president interjected dismissively, leaving with a dejected Christopher in tow. The next day, it became apparent that my former boss had indeed been fired from the company. Shortly afterward, I received a resentful call from Christopher, lamenting the loss of his job and the challenges of finding new employment at his age. "You've ruined my life. Take responsibility for what's happened," he shouted angrily over the phone. In response, I made an unexpected proposal to the furious Christopher. "How about I hire you at my company? I can't offer much in terms of pay, but it seems you're out of options because of me." Upon hearing this, Christopher exploded with emotion and abruptly hung up. The idea of being employed by someone he had ridiculed must have been a deep humiliation for him. I didn't expect him to accept the offer. A month later, however, unable to secure another job, Christopher reached out to me and asked to be hired. It surprised me, but I decided to give him a chance. Now, in a role reversal, made Christopher experience the same menial tasks and lack of responsibility that I had endured. "Why do I have to do these menial tasks? Anyone could do this," he complained bitterly. Ignoring his protests, I kept him on simple tasks, reminding him, "If you can't handle these basic duties, you'll be dismissed for incompetence." The boss's orders are absolute. There's no room for defiance. Christopher appeared downtrodden, a stark contrast to his arrogant demeanor in his previous role. Eventually, unable to bear the humiliation, he quit the company. Reflecting on this experience, I realized the irony of Christopher facing what he had inflicted upon me. Treating others as he had treated me led to his downfall, a simple truth he failed to grasp. Meanwhile, my company continues to grow steadily and thrive. I've learned that persistent effort yields results, whereas without it, success remains modest at best. Whether one ends up like Christopher or not ultimately depends on understanding this fundamental lesson.
Jane, you seriously need a break from all these dusty books. It's Clara's birthday bash tonight. You gotta join us. Liz practically commanded, her voice laced with that mix of concern and exasperation she reserved just for me. I'm Jane, a 34-year-old English literature professor, more comfortable dissecting Shakespeare's sonnets than navigating social gatherings. Fine, Liz. But if it's a snooze fest, I'm holding you responsible, I replied, marking my place in Hamlet with a sigh. That evening, Clara's party was in full swing, a whirl of laughter and clinking glasses. That's where I met Alex. He was the finance guy, his world of stocks and assets as distant from my literary haven as could be. Yet, something clicked, a spark neither of us could deny. Shakespeare, huh? That's pretty highbrow. I'm more about the Wall Street Journal than the Globe Theatre, Alex joked, his smile infectious. I chuckled, the warmth in his eyes softening my usual reserve. Well, perhaps I can show you that literature has its own charms. Might even teach you a thing or two about the human condition, I quipped, finding myself surprisingly at ease. The conversation didn't skip a beat, flowing as smoothly as the evening breeze. Soon, our casual meets turned into late-night talks, and before we knew it, we were inseparable. The idea of us seemed as natural as the turning of pages in one of my books. Meeting Alex's mother, Elaine, was like stepping into a scene from a novel. She exuded warmth and elegance, her demeanor as inviting as the home she welcomed me into. Jane, dear, it's so wonderful to finally meet you. Alex hasn't stopped talking about you. I feel like I know you already, Elaine greeted me, her voice a soothing melody. It's an absolute pleasure to meet you too, Elaine. Alex speaks so highly of you, I responded, genuinely touched by her kindness. The day Alex came to visit my family home was a chapter on its own. The awe in his eyes was unmistakable as he took in the sprawling estate, the tangible proof of my father's success. Your family's place is something else, Jane. Your dad must have a Midas touch with investments, Alex remarked, his voice a mix of admiration and something else I couldn't quite place. He's done well for himself, indeed. The stock exchange has been kind to him, I replied, my pride in my family's achievements shining through. My parents embraced Alex with open arms, his charm and apparent adoration for me sealing his place in their hearts. The stage was set, our roles as the perfect couple cemented. The wedding was a dream, a celebration of love and promises of a shared future. The days following our wedding were supposed to be the happiest of my life. Instead, they turned into a relentless storm of heartache and dread. Dad, the strongest man I knew, was suddenly confined to a hospital bed, his strength waning under the cruel grip of cancer. The hospital's sterile, white walls became our grim reality, the beeping of machines a constant, unwelcome soundtrack. One bleak evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the hospital room, Dad called me over with a feeble gesture. His eyes, once so full of life, now mirrored the fatigue and pain he was enduring. Jane, my darling, he began, his voice barely above a whisper, I need you to be strong. I've made arrangements for you, for after I'm gone. There's an inheritance, $2 million. It's yours, my dear. I want you to have a secure future. I gripped his hand, the cold reality of his words piercing my heart. Dad, please, don't talk like that. You're going to get through this. But before I could absorb the gravity of his revelation, Alex, who had been lingering by the door, stepped forward, his reaction sending a chill down my spine. 2 million, sir? That's quite a fortune. I mean, Jane, we need to think about how to manage this blessing, he said, his tone unsettlingly eager, his gaze not meeting mine. The days turned into an agonizing cycle of hospital visits and silent, tension-filled nights at home. Alex's demeanor had shifted. The man I had fallen in love with seemed consumed by thoughts of the inheritance, his warmth replaced by a cold, calculating distance. One night, as we sat in the dim glow of our living room, the silence between us thick and suffocating, Alex broke the stillness, his words like a cold gust in an already frigid room. Jane, we need to talk about the future, about the inheritance. Think about it, we could really turn our lives around. A luxury home, maybe travel the world. It's time to start planning, don't you think? He urged, his eyes not quite meeting mine. I stared at him, disbelief and anger swirling within me. Planning? My dad is lying in a hospital bed, fighting for his life, and you're here making plans for a future splurge? Is that all you care about, Alex? The money? He recoiled, as if my words were physical blows. No, Jane, you've got it all wrong. I'm just trying to look out for us, for our future. I didn't mean to. But his words rang hollow, the apology a feeble attempt to mask the naked greed that had seeped into his voice. In that moment, a painful truth began to dawn on me. The man I had vowed to spend my life with was a stranger, his thoughts not on the profound loss we were about to face, but on the financial gain it would bring. Life after Dad's diagnosis was like walking through a never-ending fog. My home, once a place of laughter and warmth, felt cold, the air thick with unsaid words and hidden agendas. Elaine, Alex's mom, came into our lives like she was the cavalry, ready to save the day. But her eyes, sharp and calculating, told a different story. Jane, honey, you're worn to a thread, Elaine said one evening, her voice smooth but with an edge that made me uneasy. Let me help around here. You shouldn't carry all this alone. I was too tired, too beaten down by the relentless waves of worry, to argue. Thanks, Elaine. I appreciate it, I really do, I replied, trying to muster a smile. But the real storm was still brewing, quietly, sneakily. That night, Elaine came to my room with a small bottle in her hand. Jane, you look like you could use some real rest. These will help you sleep. Trust me, she said, pushing the bottle of pills towards me. Something in her insistence set off alarm bells in my mind, but the promise of a few hours free from my racing thoughts was too tempting. All right, I'll give them a try. Thanks, Elaine, I said, though a part of me was screaming to throw the pills away. No sooner had she left than whispers from the living room reached my ears, a low murmur of conspiracy that pulled me out of my bed and towards the door. I cracked it open, the sliver of light from the living room casting long shadows on the floor. Alex's voice, usually so warm and loving, was cold, almost cruel. She's out like a light, Mom. Those pills knock her right out. We can talk business now, he said, a hint of glee in his tone that turned my blood to ice. Elaine's reply was a quiet, venomous chuckle. Perfect. Now, about that inheritance. Half of it is legally yours, you know. We're talking about a serious cash injection. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. These were the people who were supposed to be my family, my support. Instead, they were plotting like villains in one of the tragedies I taught in class. Alex's next words were a punch to the gut. Half? That's kids' play, Mom. I want the whole pie. We need to figure out how to get Jane to sign it all over. Once I have the cash, I can cut her loose. I stood there, my hand on the doorknob, feeling like the floor had just dropped away from under me. This wasn't just a betrayal, it was a full-blown conspiracy, a plan to rob me of my inheritance, my dignity, my life as I knew it. The morning sun did little to brighten the heavy atmosphere in the house after I uncovered Alex and Elaine's despicable scheme. Sitting at the kitchen table, the untouched coffee in front of me turned cold, a stark reminder of the chilling conversation I had overheard. The betrayal felt like a gaping wound, and I was at a loss, unsure how to navigate this treacherous storm. Mom entered the kitchen, her steps firm, her presence always a beacon of strength in our home. She noticed my distress immediately, her perceptive eyes missing nothing. "Jane, what's wrong? You're as pale as a ghost. Talk to me," she urged, her voice a blend of concern and command. I hesitated, the weight of betrayal heavy on my tongue. But seeing the unwavering support in her eyes, I found the courage to confess. "Mom, it's Alex and Elaine. I overheard them last night. They're plotting, scheming to take Dad's inheritance, and then, they plan to leave me with nothing." The kitchen fell silent, the air thick with tension. Mom's face remained stoic, but her eyes were sharp, a storm brewing in their depths. "Is that so?" she said calmly, her voice betraying no hint of the rage I knew she must be feeling. "Well, they've picked the wrong family to mess with. We're not pawns in their little game, Jane. We're the ones who'll be calling checkmate." Her words were like a lifeline, pulling me back from the edge of despair. "But how, Mom? They've got everything planned out." "It's like they've been setting this trap for a long time," I replied, the enormity of the situation threatening to overwhelm me. Mom's smile was thin but determined. "Planning is one thing, executing is another. They think they're clever, but they're not the only ones who can play this game. We need to be strategic, think 2 steps ahead." The kitchen became our war room, the table a battleground where strategies were formed and tactics were laid out. "First, we need to secure your assets, make sure they can't get their hands on what's rightfully yours," Mom said, her mind racing through the legal labyrinths. "But Mom, the inheritance is huge, and it's all in my name. How can we protect it from them?" I asked, the problem seeming insurmountable. She gave me a look that was both fierce and reassuring. "We'll consult with the best lawyers, set up trusts, do whatever it takes. Your father didn't work his whole life for his legacy to fall into the hands of vultures." As the plan took shape, I felt a spark of hope ignite within me. "Mom, you're incredible. I don't know what I'd do without you." Her hand reached across the table, gripping mine with a strength that bolstered my resolve. "You're your father's daughter, Jane, strong and smart. You'll never have to face anything alone. Now, let's put our plan into action and show those snakes they've bitten off more than they can chew." The day of the will reading was like the calm before the storm. The notary's office was stark and formal, a stark contrast to the turmoil churning in my heart. Alex and Elaine were there, their faces poorly masked with faux solemnity, but their eyes, hungry and calculating, betrayed their true intentions. The notary, a stern-faced man with a no-nonsense air, cleared his throat, breaking the tense silence. "We are gathered here to read the last will and testament of Mr. James Harrington. As per his wishes, the contents of the will are to be disclosed in the presence of his immediate family." Alex leaned in, a wolfish grin barely concealed. "This is it, Jane. Our new beginning," he whispered, his breath cold against my ear. I stiffened, repulsed by his proximity and the implication of his words. Before I could respond, the notary began to speak, his voice formal and detached. "Mr. Harrington bequeathed the sum of $2 million to his daughter, Jane Harper." A gasp escaped Elaine, her facade crumbling for a moment to reveal the greed that lay beneath. Alex's hand twitched, a visceral reaction to the mention of the money. He was about to congratulate me, no doubt seeing dollar signs, when the notary continued. "However, it is also stated here that Mr. Harrington incurred debts amounting to $2.5 million. The room went cold. Alex's face drained of color, his earlier excitement replaced by shock and disbelief. Elaine's mouth opened and closed, a fish out of water, her plans unraveling before her eyes. "This can't be right," Alex stammered, his composure shattered. "There must be some mistake." The notary, unfazed, pushed forward a stack of documents. "I assure you, everything is documented and legal. Mr. Harrington's assets and liabilities are now passed on to his next of kin." Elaine's eyes darted between the papers and my stoic face. But that means, half of the debt is Alex's responsibility too? Yes, ma'am. According to the law, marital assets and liabilities are shared, the notary confirmed, his voice devoid of sympathy. The revelation hit Alex and Elaine like a physical blow. Their dream of wealth had turned into a nightmare of debt. Elaine's earlier warmth vanished, her true nature, venomous and self-serving, coming to the forefront. "We're not paying for this. It's her father's mess," Elaine hissed, her earlier facade of the doting mother-in-law gone. Alex, desperation creeping into his voice, turned to me. "Jane, we need to sort this out. You can't let this happen." I looked at him, the man I once loved, now a stranger driven by greed and deceit. "Sort this out? Alex, you made your intentions clear. You're not in this for me or for us. You're in this for the money." The room was thick with tension, the notary a silent observer to the drama unfolding before him. In that moment, the storm broke, the veil lifted, revealing the true colors of the people I had once called family. But as I stood there, facing the betrayal and the mountain of debt before me, I knew I wasn't alone. Mom's hand found mine, her grip firm and reassuring. "We'll handle this, Jane. Together," she whispered, her voice a bastion of strength. Alex and Elaine, initially struck dumb by the revelation, quickly erupted into a whirlwind of fury and disbelief. "This is insane," Alex bellowed, his face contorting with anger. "Are you seriously telling me this pile of papers is for real? Show them again, this can't be happening." The notary, a pillar of calm amidst the storm, methodically laid out the documents once more. Each line, each number, was a testament to a reality they couldn't escape. Elaine, her composure shattered, turned her venom towards me. "You knew, didn't you? You and your mother planned this. You're trying to drown us in your family's mess." That's when Mom stood up. Her presence filled the room, a quiet force amidst the chaos. "Enough," she said, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "My husband had his faults, his vices. The gambling, the debts, they were his burden. And now, according to the law, they are shared by Jane and Alex." Elaine's face was a mask of rage, her earlier facade of kindness nowhere to be seen. "We're not paying for someone else's mistakes. We won't let this happen." Cornered and desperate, Alex played his final, desperate card. "If that's how it's going to be, then fine. I want a divorce. And in that agreement, we'll make it crystal clear, neither of us gets anything from the other. No claims, no money, no property. Nothing." His words, meant to intimidate, only fueled my newfound resolve. "A divorce? That's the best idea you've had in a long time, Alex. Let's make it official. You walk away empty-handed. No ties, no debts, no nothing." The agreement was drafted with clinical precision, a clear, unambiguous document that severed the ties that once bound us. We signed it, each stroke of the pen marking the end of a chapter, the end of a farce disguised as a marriage. After signing the divorce papers, the heavy door of the notary's office closed behind us with a thud that felt final. The crisp air outside did little to clear the heaviness that hung over me. Alex and Elaine, their masks of pretense thoroughly discarded now, couldn't contain their contempt. "Well, Jane, looks like you're stuck with the short end of the stick. $500,000 in debt. That's quite a hole you're in," Alex sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. Elaine's laugh was cold, void of any warmth she once feigned. "You really thought you could outsmart us? Enjoy paying off your father's mess." Just then, Mom stepped forward, her demeanor calm but with an undercurrent of steel. "You two might want to hold off on your celebrations. You see, there's more to this story." Alex scoffed, his arrogance unshaken. "What could you possibly say to change anything now, Mrs. Harrington?" Mom's smile was enigmatic, a prelude to the revelation that was about to turn the tables. "Well, for starters, Jane's not alone in this. I'm here, and unlike what you've been led to believe, the real financial genius in this family has always been me." Elaine's smirk faltered, confusion clouding her features. Alex's expression mirrored his mother's, disbelief and curiosity warring on his face. I've been the one managing the successful investments, the stock market ventures, not my late husband. My net worth? It's currently around $70 million. And yes, Jane is my sole heir. The impact of Mom's words hit Alex and Elaine like a physical blow, their smugness evaporating, replaced by shock and a dawning realization of the grave miscalculation they had made. Alex, the color draining from his face, stammered, 70 million? But that means… Mom's gaze was unwavering, her voice firm. It means, Alex, that you and your mother have been chasing shadows while ignoring the real treasure. Jane's inheritance from me will secure her future. As for the debts left by her father, consider them settled. I won't have my daughter burdened by them. Elaine's mouth opened and closed, words failing her for the first time. Alex, his knees seemingly unable to support him, sank to the ground, his earlier bravado shattered. Please, Jane, I didn't know. I was wrong. Forgive me, he pleaded, his voice barely a whisper, the mask of the cunning strategist gone, leaving only a desperate man in its wake. But it was too late for apologies, too late for regrets. I looked down at the man I once loved, now a stranger groveling at my feet. Forgiveness is earned, Alex, not begged for. You made your choice, and now you have to live with it. Turning my back on Alex and Elaine, Mom and I walked away, their pleas and protests fading into the background. The last laugh was indeed ours, but it wasn't one of triumph or joy. It was a laugh that acknowledged the end of a painful chapter and the beginning of a new, hopeful journey. The debt, the deceit, the heartbreak, they were all behind us now. Ahead lay a path of healing and rebuilding, with the strength and wisdom of a bond that no storm could break. The last laugh was a promise of brighter days, of a future where the shadows of the past no longer loomed over us. It was the laughter of freedom, of liberation from the chains of greed and betrayal. And as we stepped into the light of a new dawn, it was the laughter that heralded the beginning of a new chapter, written on our own terms, in our own time. The dust had settled, and the dawn of a new day brought clarity and a profound sense of peace. My life, once entangled with Alex and Elaine's deceit, was now my own. Yet, the echoes of their betrayal hadn't faded completely. Alex, in a last-ditch effort to salvage what he had lost, showed up on my doorstep, his eyes hollow, his stance one of desperation. Jane, please, you have to listen to me. I was wrong, terribly wrong. Can't we just start over, forget all that happened? He pleaded, his voice a mix of regret and fear. I looked at him, the man I once thought I knew, and felt nothing but detachment. Start over? After everything you did? Alex, you don't seem to understand. It's over. There's nothing left to say. Before he could respond, a sharp knock interrupted our standoff. Two men, faces stern and purposeful, stood at my doorstep. Are you Jane Harper? We're here about the debts your husband accrued. He's been borrowing money, making some risky deals, and it's time to settle up. The news didn't shock me as much as it might have before. Alex's capacity for deception seemed boundless. But I was prepared, the pain and betrayal I had endured had forged a resilience I never knew I had. I invited them in, offering a seat but not comfort. I understand this is a difficult situation, but I'm afraid you're knocking on the wrong door. Alex's face went pale, his eyes darting between me and the creditors, the reality of his situation sinking in. I calmly presented the divorce papers, the ink dry but the words echoing the finality of our severed ties. As you can see, we're no longer connected legally. Any debts he incurred are his and his alone. We made it explicitly clear in our divorce agreement, no claims on each other's assets or debts. The creditors scanned the documents, their expressions turning from frustration to understanding. Seems like you've got everything in order, ma'am. We're sorry to bother you. We'll take this up with Mr. Alex Harper directly. As they stood up to leave, Alex reached out, desperation clear in his voice. Jane, please, you can't let them do this. I'm ruined without your help. I looked at him, a man drowning in the consequences of his own greed and deceit. Alex, you made your choices. Now you have to live with them. It's time you faced your own storms. With the closing of the door, the chapter of Alex and Elaine finally ended, their presence in my life nothing more than a harsh lesson learned. The dawn of this new day wasn't just the rising of the sun. It was the rising of a stronger, wiser me, a woman who had weathered the storm and emerged not just intact, but empowered.
Hey, there, name's Julia. I'm 35, work as a school teacher, and I'm married to Mark. He's a big shot manager at some corporate firm, rakes in a good amount of cash. We've been hitched for about 5 years now. Mark's got a son from his previous marriage, kid's name is John, he's 12. Let me paint you a picture of our lives. I'm as normal as they come, got a steady job, a home, a man I love, and a kid who isn't mine but I've come to love him like my own. Sounds pretty good, right? Well, it ain't all sunshine and rainbows. Mark and I have been trying to have a kid of our own. Month after month, the same routine. The hope, the anticipation, and then the crushing disappointment. The worst part of it all? Mark points the finger at me. One evening, Mark comes home, his face is like a thundercloud. He throws his briefcase on the couch, loosens his tie, and pours himself a stiff drink. I'm in the kitchen, trying to cook dinner, trying to ignore the tension that's thick in the air. He takes a sip of his drink, then turns to me, his eyes hard. Julia, he says, his voice cold, I have a kid. I didn't have any issues with Linda. It's you who can't. His voice trails off, but the message is loud and clear. I'm the problem. His folks, they're no better. They echo his sentiments. I still remember a family dinner at their place. Mark's mom, a stern woman with a sharp tongue, looks at me across the table and says, Linda gave us a grandson. We thought you'd give us a grandchild too, Julia. But it seems we were wrong. The room goes quiet, and I feel like I've been slapped. I can't say anything, can't do anything. I just sit there, my face hot, my heart pounding. Then there's Linda, Mark's ex, the mother of John. She's like a specter that haunts our lives. She's a barmaid, always dressed to kill, always the life of the party. I've met her many times. She's got a way about her, a way that draws people in. She knows how to talk, how to charm. She's got Mark's folks eating out of her hand. I remember one time she came over to pick up John. Mark's mom was there, and they greeted each other like long-lost friends. I watched from the doorway, feeling like a stranger in my own home. Julia, we were just looking at old photos. You should join us. Linda's voice, sugary sweet, cuts through the silence of the room. She's sitting on our couch, flipping through our family album with Mark's mother. I stand in the doorway, my heart pounding in my chest. I feel like an intruder in my own home. I plaster a smile on my face and walk over to them. The photos are a stark reminder of a past I was never part of. Mark and Linda, young and in love. John, a chubby baby in Linda's arms. Linda and Mark's mom, laughing over something, looking like best friends. It's like a punch to the gut. John was such a cute baby, Linda coos, pointing at a photo. I force a laugh, nodding in agreement. I feel Mark's mom's eyes on me, scrutinizing, judging. The room is filled with an uncomfortable silence. I excuse myself, mumbling something about checking on dinner. Mark, meanwhile, is a ghost in our lives. He's always at work, always at the golf club, always on his computer. He's there, but he's not really there, you know? He pays his alimony to Linda, buys John the latest gadgets, tries to be the cool dad. But when it comes to me, to us, he's always too tired, always too busy. One night, he comes home late from the club, the smell of alcohol heavy on his breath. I'm sitting on the edge of the bed, a report card in my hand. Mark, I say, trying to keep my voice steady, we need to talk about John's grades. He grunts, his eyes still closed. Not now, Julia, he mumbles, I'm tired. But Mark, I insist. His grades are slipping. We need to. Julia, he snaps, his voice harsh. I said not now. He turns over, his back to me, and that's the end of our conversation. Later that week, I'm at the grocery store, picking up some stuff for dinner. I bump into Linda in the frozen food aisle. She's got a cart full of junk food, probably for John. He's always been a picky eater, always preferred junk over home-cooked meals. I try to keep my distance, but she spots me. Julia, she calls out, a smirk on her face. Shopping for dinner? I nod, forcing a smile. Just the usual stuff, I reply, keeping my voice casual. She laughs, a high-pitched, annoying sound. You know, John loves my spaghetti. You should try making it sometime. Her words are like a slap in the face. But I keep my cool, nodding and mumbling something about trying it out. I rush home, my mind a whirl of thoughts. I'm left to pick up the pieces. I'm left to play mom to John, to help him with his homework, to attend parent-teacher meetings, to deal with his mood swings. I'm left to clean up Mark's mess, to play the dutiful wife, to put on a happy face when all I want to do is scream. I'm sitting at my desk, scrolling through my phone when a message pops up. It's from my friend, Jenna. There's a photo attached. I open it, and my heart stops. It's Mark, my Mark, with his arm around Linda. They're in a bar, laughing, looking cozy. I can't breathe, can't think. I feel like I've been punched in the gut. I wait for Mark to come home, the photo burning a hole in my pocket. He walks in, tired, a little drunk. I take a deep breath, steeling myself. Mark, I say, my voice steady, we need to talk. He grunts, dropping his keys on the table. What is it, Julia? He asks, his voice tired. I hold up the photo, my hand shaking. He looks at it, his face blank. Then he laughs, a loud, harsh sound. So what? He asks, his voice cold. Linda and I are friends. We have a kid together. His words hit me like a slap in the face. Friends, I repeat, my voice a whisper. He nods, his face hard. Yeah, Julia, friends. We have a kid together. We have a history together. What's your problem? I feel tears prick at my eyes, but I blink them back. I won't let him see me cry. My problem, I say, my voice rising, is that you're my husband, Mark. You're supposed to care about me, about us. He scoffs, rolling his eyes. Oh, Julia, he says, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Always the drama queen. I'm bored, Julia. Bored with this, with us. Linda, she's fun. She's exciting. She understands me. I feel like I've been punched in the gut. I can't breathe, can't think, but I won't let him see me break. I won't give him the satisfaction. Fine, I say, my voice cold. If that's how you feel, then maybe we should end this. He looks at me, his face blank. Then he shrugs, a casual, cruel gesture. Maybe we should, he says, his voice cold. He walks away, leaving me standing there, the photo still clutched in my hand. The next day, I decide to confront Linda. I find her at the bar, serving drinks, laughing with the customers. She looks up as I walk in, her smile fading. Julia, she says, her voice cautious. What brings you here? I slam the photo on the bar, my heart pounding in my chest. What's this, Linda? I ask, my voice steady. She looks at the photo, then at me. She shrugs, a smirk on her face. Mark and I are friends, Julia, she says, her voice casual. We have a kid together. I feel a surge of anger, of betrayal. But I keep my cool, keep my voice steady. He's my husband, Linda, I say, my voice cold, and I won't let you ruin my marriage. She laughs, a harsh, cruel sound. Oh, Julia, she says, her voice dripping with sarcasm, your marriage was ruined the moment you walked into it. Mark's always been mine. He always will be. I feel a surge of anger, of determination. I won't let her win, won't let her destroy my life. We'll see about that, Linda, I say, my voice cold. We'll see about that. I turn and walk away, leaving her standing there, the photo still on the bar. I've got a fight in me, and I'm not going down without a fight. It's a quiet afternoon and I'm sitting with John, Mark's son, at our kitchen table. We've got his school books spread out between us, and I'm helping him with his math homework. John and I have always had a good relationship. He's a good kid, smart and kind. He's nothing like his mother, thank God. Julia, he says, his voice quiet, why does 2x plus 3 equal 5? I explain the equation to him, simplifying it so he understands. He nods, scribbling down the answer in his notebook. We work in silence for a while, the only sound the scratch of his pencil and the occasional sigh of frustration. Then, out of the blue, he says, Dad and Mom meet a lot, you know? I freeze, my heart pounding in my chest. I force a smile, pretending not to be affected. Oh, I ask, my voice casual. That's nice. He nods, oblivious to the turmoil inside me. Yeah, he says, they meet at the park, at the mall. They talk a lot. They laugh a lot. His words are like a punch in the gut. But I can't let him see my pain. I can't let him know how much his words hurt. John, I say, my voice steady, your dad and I, we're good, okay? We're happy. Your mom, she's just a part of his past. He looks at me, his eyes wide. Okay, he says, his voice small, okay, Julia. Just then, the doorbell rings. It's Linda, here to pick up John. I stand, my heart pounding in my chest. John runs to the door, excited to see his mom. I follow him, my mind racing. I have to confront her, have to tell her to stay away from Mark. Hey, John, Linda says, her voice sweet. Ready to go? John nods, running to get his bag. Linda turns to me, her eyes cold. Julia, she says, her voice icy, we need to talk. I nod, my heart pounding in my chest. Yes, I say, my voice steady, we do. We step outside, away from John. I take a deep breath, steeling myself. Linda, I say, my voice cold, you need to stay away from Mark. She laughs, a harsh, cruel sound. Why? She asks, her voice mocking. Because he's your husband? Because you love him? I feel a surge of anger, of frustration. But I keep my cool, keep my voice steady. Yes, I say, my voice cold, because he's my husband. Because I love him. She smirks, her eyes cold. Oh, Julia, she says, her voice dripping with sarcasm. You're so naive. Her words hit me like a slap in the face. But I won't let her see me break. I won't give her the satisfaction. I'll fight for him, Linda, I say, my voice cold, I won't let you take him away from me. She laughs, a harsh, cruel sound. Oh, Julia, she says, her voice mocking. You don't stand a chance. I have John. He's my trump card. Her words are like a punch in the gut. I can't breathe, can't think. But I won't let her see me break. I won't give her the satisfaction. We'll see about that, Linda, I say, my voice cold. We'll see about that. She leaves, taking John with her. I'm left standing there, my heart pounding in my chest. But I won't let her win. I won't let her take Mark away from me. The days roll on, and I find myself in the park with John again. The sun is shining, casting long shadows on the ground. Kids are laughing, playing. It's a normal day, just like any other. But inside, I'm a whirl of thoughts and emotions. John and I have a routine. We walk around the park, chat about school, friends, video games. He's a good kid, easy to talk to. I've grown fond of him. He's not my son, but I care about him. And that's why the revelation I'm about to stumble upon will hit me so hard. We get back from the park, and it's time for homework. John's got a biology assignment, something about genetics and blood types. I help him out, explaining the basics. Type O, type A, type B, type AB, positive, negative, and so on. It's a bit complicated, but John's a quick learner. The assignment is a simple one. If a mother and a father both have type A blood, what blood type would their child most likely have? The answer is, of course, type A. John gets it right, and I give him a thumbs up. Then, he looks at me with a puzzled expression. But, Julia, he says, I have type B blood. I freeze. My heart pounds in my chest. That's impossible. Unless Mark isn't John's father. I stare at John, my mind racing. But I can't let him see my shock. I can't let him know what I'm thinking. Oh, I say, forcing a casual tone. That's interesting. Who told you that? My doctor, he replies, at my last checkup. I nod, trying to keep my face neutral. Well, sometimes these things can be confusing. Let's just focus on the homework for now, okay? He nods, and we go back to the assignment. But my mind is elsewhere. I'm thinking about Mark, about Linda, about the truth. I'm thinking about how I'm going to deal with this. A few hours later, Linda comes to pick up John. I watch as they drive away, my heart heavy in my chest. I'm not sure what to do, how to handle this. But I know I can't ignore it. I can't pretend like nothing's wrong. John, bless his heart, tells Linda about the genetics problem we solved. He's smiling, excited about his new knowledge. But Linda, she goes pale. She looks at me, her eyes wide. I pretend not to notice. I pretend like everything's fine. But it's not. I've discovered a secret, a truth that could change everything. And I'm not sure what to do with it. But one thing's for sure. I'm not going to let Linda win. I'm not going to let her take Mark away from me. I'm not sure what the future holds. I'm not sure what this revelation means for me, for Mark, for John. But I'll face it head on. I'll fight for what's right. I'll fight for the truth. It was just another day. I was in the kitchen, cooking up some breakfast. Mark was sitting at the table, reading the newspaper. John was upstairs, getting ready for school. It was just like any other day, but inside, I was a mess. Julia, where's the butter? Mark asked, not looking up from his newspaper. In the fridge, where it always is, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. He grunted and got up to get it himself. I watched him, my heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't help but wonder if he knew, if he suspected anything. John came down the stairs, his hair still wet from the shower. He grabbed a piece of toast and started to eat. John, sit down and eat properly, I said, trying to sound stern. He just shrugged and kept eating. He was always like that, always in a hurry. I watched him, my mind racing. I couldn't help but wonder if he knew, if he suspected anything. After breakfast, Mark left for work and John left for school. I was alone in the house, just me and my thoughts. I went up to John's bathroom, my heart pounding in my chest. I stared at his hairbrush, my hand shaking. I reached out and pulled out a few strands of hair. I put them in a small plastic bag, then did the same with Mark's hairbrush. I sent the hairs off for a DNA test. It was a long shot, but I had to know. I had to know if Mark was John's father. The waiting was the hardest part. Every day, I checked the mail, my heart pounding in my chest. Every day, I was disappointed, but I didn't give up. I couldn't. Not now. Finally, the results arrived. I stared at the envelope, my heart pounding in my chest. This was it. This was the moment of truth. I ripped open the envelope, my hands shaking. I pulled out the paper, my eyes scanning the words. And then, I saw it. The results. The truth. I won't tell you what it says. Not yet. That's a story for another day, but I will tell you this. The truth changed everything. It was a bombshell, a revelation. It turned my world upside down. That day started off pretty ordinary. Mark came home early, and he wasn't alone. Linda was with him, and so were his parents. They had that look, you know the one. The look that says, "We're here, and we're taking over." I was sitting on the couch, holding on to the DNA test results. Mark cleared his throat. "Julia," he started, "I want a divorce." I didn't react. I didn't need to. I knew this was coming. I had been preparing for this. So, I just sat there, staring at him. Linda had this nasty grin on her face. "Guess you're not so special after all, huh?" she said. "Just a gray mouse." Mark's parents were nodding, looking pleased. They never liked me. They thought I was beneath their son. But I didn't care. I didn't care what they thought of me. Not anymore. I stood up, my hands shaking. I walked over to Mark, the DNA test results still in my hands. "You want a divorce?" I asked. "Fine. But first, you might want to take a look at this." I handed him the DNA test results. He took them, looking confused. He read them, his eyes getting wider with every word. This can't be right," he stammered. John's not my son?" I nodded. "That's right," I said, "John's not your son." Linda looked shocked. She grabbed the test results, her hands shaking. She read them, her face going pale. "No," she whispered, "no, this can't be true. I didn't cheat on you, Mark. I swear." But Mark wasn't having it. "You're lying," he yelled. "You did this, Julia. You did this to get rid of them." His parents chimed in, siding with Linda. "Linda wouldn't cheat. This is your doing, Julia." I shrugged. "Fine," I said. "Let's do another test then. Let's see if these results hold up." All eyes turned to Linda. She was pale, shaking. "No," she said, "no more tests." I smirked. "Why not, Linda? If you're so sure John is Mark's, what's the harm in another test?" Linda broke down, tears streaming down her face. Okay. I cheated. John isn't Mark's." Mark was furious. "You lied to me," he said, his voice cold. "You lied to me for years. I want all my money back. Every single penny." His parents looked shocked. They tried to argue, tried to deny it. But it was no use. The truth was out. And nothing they could say or do would change that. I watched them, feeling a sense of satisfaction. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. I felt powerful. I'd done it. I'd finally left the big mansion, the shimmering chandeliers, the empty glamour, and the web of lies. I'd traded it all for a small, homely apartment in a quiet part of town. It was a far cry from the opulence I was used to, but it was real. It was mine. I'd filled it with second-hand furniture, a few potted plants, and a lot of hope. I continued to teach at the local school, and those kids, they were my lifeline. They kept me grounded, kept me real. Mark, my ex-husband, was another story. He'd finally severed ties with Linda, his ex-wife. He'd come to see her true colors, but it was too late. He had washed his hands off John, Linda's son. Poor kid, he wasn't even Mark's own, but he had been caught in the crossfire. But as much as I tried to forget, the past had a way of sneaking up on me. I missed John, not Mark, never Mark. But John, that kid had wormed his way into my heart. I loved him like he was my own. And it hurt like hell knowing that I wasn't going to see him grow up. Out of the blue, Linda called. "You've ruined my life," she accused, her voice shrill and hysterical. "You've ruined John's life." I was taken aback, but I didn't let her get to me. "Look who's talking, Linda," I retorted. "You're the one who brewed this storm. You can't blame anyone else for the rain." She hung up on me. Good riddance. Mark was suing Linda, trying to get back all the money he'd spent on John. His parents were backing him up, of course. They were always on his side. The whole thing was a mess, a dirty, ugly mess. I wanted no part of it. I had my own life to live, my own battles to fight. I was done with them, done with their lies and their games. But I couldn't help but think about John. I hoped he was okay. I hoped he knew that I still cared about him, that I still loved him. I hoped that one day, he would understand why I did what I did. For now, though, I had to keep moving forward. I had to make a life for myself, a life that was mine and mine alone. I was Julia, and this was my story. I was no one's victim, no one's fool. I was a survivor.
I'm Bella, 27, and by no means a pushover. I work as a secretary, a job that has me juggling calls and coffee, all while trying to keep a straight face when my boss cracks one of his stale jokes. Life was a regular routine until that night at a friend's party when I bumped into Jake. Jake was a tall, lanky guy with a smile that could light up the room. He had that effortless charm about him, cracking jokes one minute and deep in thought the next. We got talking, and before I knew it, hours had passed. "Hey, I'm Jake. You look like you could use a better drink than that," he said, nodding at the almost empty plastic cup in my hand. I raised an eyebrow, "And you look like you've got a better suggestion?" "Follow me and find out," he grinned, leading the way to where the real party was, a table laden with all sorts of drinks. We spent the evening talking about everything and nothing. His jokes were actually funny, a refreshing change from the dry humor I was used to at work. As the party wound down, we exchanged numbers. "Don't be a stranger," Jake said as he left, "or do, but only if you're into that mystery vibe." I laughed, tucking away his number. "We'll see, funny guy." As I headed home, I couldn't shake off the feeling that this was the beginning of something. But that night, it was just the city lights, the lingering laughter from the party, and the slight buzz from the drinks. The next few weeks were a blur of texts and calls with Jake. He was like a breath of fresh air, always popping up with a joke or a plan to meet up. It was hard not to get swept up in his energy. Then came the day he invited me over to his place. "You gotta meet the folks," he said casually, as if it wasn't a big deal. "Meet your parents?" I hesitated. "Aren't we moving a bit fast?" "Nah, they're cool. Plus, I want them to meet the girl who's been stealing all my time," he joked, but I could tell he was serious. I agreed, not knowing what I was walking into. Looking back, I wish I had taken a bit more time, maybe then I would have seen what was coming. But life doesn't give you a heads up, does it? No, it just throws you in the deep end and watches as you try to swim. The day to meet Jake's parents came quicker than I'd have liked. I remember standing in front of my closet, trying to pick out something that said "Nice to meet you," and not "I'm here to steal your son." Finally, settling on a simple dress, I took a deep breath and headed out. Jake's house was one of those big, sprawling places with a garden out front. Flowers, trees, you name it, his mom had it growing there. "She'll love to show you around," Jake had said with an enthusiasm I didn't quite share. As we walked up to the door, Jake squeezed my hand. "Don't worry, they're going to love you." The door swung open, and there stood Mrs. Green, a woman with a stern look that could make a grown man flinch. "So, this is her," she said, eyeing me from head to toe. Not exactly the warm welcome I was hoping for. "Mom, this is Bella." "Bella, my mother," Jake introduced. "Charmed," I said, extending my hand. She gave a nod, her lips tight. "Come in. Let's not stand around." The inside of the house was as immaculate as the garden. We sat in the living room, and that's when the interrogation began. Mrs. Green didn't waste any time. "So, Bella, Jake tells us you're a secretary. That must be interesting," she said, the word interesting hanging in the air like it was a bad smell. "Yeah, it's got its moments. Keeps me on my toes," I replied, trying to keep it light. "And your boss, he's a man, I presume," she prodded, her eyes narrowing. I nodded. "Yes, he is. A very professional and respectful one." Mrs. Green hummed, as if she had expected as much. "I suppose you spend a lot of time together, being his secretary and all. I could feel the insinuation heavy in her tone. Jake jumped in. Mom, come on, let's not start this. No, it's okay, I said, feeling a need to defend myself. We work together, but that's it. There's nothing more. Mrs. Green looked at me, then at Jake, and then back to me. I see. Well, as long as it's professional. The conversation stumbled on, every topic somehow circling back to my job or my relationship with my boss. It was like she had a one-track mind set on making me uncomfortable. At one point, Jake excused himself to take a call, leaving me alone with his mother. You know, my son could do a lot better than a secretary, she said, her voice low but clear. I was taken aback. I'm sorry you feel that way. I care a lot about Jake, and I'm not here to cause any trouble. Mrs. Green stood up, her posture rigid. Just so we're clear, I have my eye on you. Any slip up, and I'll make sure Jake sees sense. The threat hung between us, heavy and cold. I sat there, trying to process what just happened. It was clear this wasn't going to be easy. When Jake came back, I plastered a smile on my face, but inside, I was reeling. After a few months of dating, Jake and I decided it was time to take the next step, moving in together. I remember the day I left my small, cozy apartment, boxes in hand, a mix of excitement and nerves bubbling in my stomach. Jake was all grins, helping me settle into what was now our place. It was nice, waking up next to him every morning, sharing coffee and lazy weekends. But as they say, good things never last, especially if Mrs. Green has anything to say about it. One Saturday morning, as we were lounging around, the doorbell rang. Jake went to answer it, and in came Mrs. Green, her eyes scanning the room like she was looking for something, or rather, someone to criticize. Mother! What a surprise, Jake said, clearly caught off guard. Save it, Jacob. I know what's going on here, she snapped, her eyes finally landing on me. Living in sin, are we? Jake's face turned red. Mom, it's not like that. We're serious about each other. She scoffed. Serious? Please. You barely know her. I stood up, feeling the need to defend our relationship. Mrs. Green, I care about Jake, and we're happy together. Happy? She laughed, a harsh sound that filled the room. Let's see how happy you are when the novelty wears off. She walked around, inspecting the place like she was going to find something incriminating. Her eyes landed on a photo of Jake and me at a beach. And what's this? Hardly appropriate, wouldn't you say? Jake tried to intervene. Mom, that's enough. But she was on a roll. I won't have my son shacking up with just anyone. What will people think? I could feel the anger rising in me. We're not hurting anyone. We're adults, making our own decisions. Mrs. Green turned to me, her gaze sharp. You may have fooled my son, but you don't fool me. I see right through you. The argument escalated from there, voices raised, words thrown like punches. In the end, Mrs. Green left, but not before declaring, "This isn't over." Her visit left a sour taste, the tension hanging between Jake and me. We tried to brush it off, go about our day, but it wasn't the same. Her words echoed in the back of my mind, a constant reminder of the disapproval looming over us. As days turned into weeks, the strain grew. Small arguments became regular, each one chipping away at the happiness we had built. I couldn't shake the feeling that Mrs. Green was somewhere out there, smirking, pleased with the chaos she had sown. One night, I worked late. The project was a beast, and everyone had left except me and my boss, who was in his office doing who knows what. "Bella, you still here?" my boss called out as he finally emerged. "Yeah, just finishing up this report," I replied, stretching my arms. "Late night, huh? Let me drive you home." "It's not safe this late," he offered. I was tired, the thought of waiting for a bus wasn't appealing, so I agreed. We walked to his car, making small talk about the day. It was all very normal until we pulled up to my place. "Thanks for the ride," I said, reaching for the door. "No problem, Bella. See you tomorrow," he replied with a tired smile. As I got out of the car, I didn't notice Jake standing there, his face a mix of anger and hurt. I realized too late as he stormed towards me. "Bella, what the hell is this?" Jake shouted, his eyes darting from me to my boss driving away. "It's not what it looks like, Jake. He was just giving me a ride home," I tried to explain. "A ride home? At this hour? With him?" He was fuming, not listening to a word I said. "Jake, please, you're overreacting. It's late, I was alone at the office, and he offered to drive me. That's all," I pleaded. "All, huh? And I'm supposed to believe that?" His voice was loud, attracting a few glances from neighbors. "I'm telling you the truth. Why won't you believe me?" My voice cracked, the frustration and hurt bubbling up. "Because I know men like him. And you, out late, with your boss? It's not right," he accused. "Jake, you're being ridiculous. Nothing is going on." "I love you," I said, my voice firm. He scoffed. "Yeah? Well, it sure doesn't look like it." The argument went back and forth, each accusation more hurtful than the last. Eventually, he stormed off, leaving me standing there, alone and bewildered. I grabbed a few essentials and headed back to my old place. The night was quiet, but my mind was a loud mess of thoughts and worries. I couldn't believe a simple act of kindness from my boss would lead to this. No sooner had I settled into my old, now strangely unfamiliar bed, the phone rang. It was Mrs. Green. Her voice oozed satisfaction. "Well, Bella, seems like you've moved back." "Can't say I'm surprised." I knew it was only a matter of time. Her laughter was cold, ringing in my ears long after I had hung up. I lay there, the weight of her words pressing down on me. I realized then that this was far from over. Her glee at my predicament was just another reminder of the uphill battle I was facing, not just with Jake, but with his entire family. And as I drifted into a restless sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread for what was yet to come. Life was quiet after the big blowout with Jake. I kept to myself, trying to mend the pieces of my bruised heart. Days turned into weeks, and just as I started to feel a bit like my old self again, life decided to throw me another curveball. I found out I was pregnant. I remember sitting in my bathroom, staring at the positive test. A mix of emotions flooded through me: fear, excitement, but mostly a deep, nagging worry about how Jake would react. I debated telling him, going back and forth in my mind, but eventually, I decided against it. I would raise this child on my own. But secrets have a way of coming out, and this one was no different. Jake found out. I still don't know how, but one day, there he was, standing at my door, looking as shocked and scared as I felt. "Bella, is it true? Are we going to have a baby?" he stammered, his face pale. I nodded, unable to form words. The silence stretched between us, heavy and awkward. "Why didn't you tell me, Bella? Why?" he finally managed, his voice a mix of hurt and anger. I was scared, Jake. Scared of how you'd react, scared of doing this all alone," I confessed, the words tumbling out. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I knew all too well. "We should have talked about it. It's not just your decision, Bella." I knew he was right, but at the moment, it didn't seem that simple. "I know, and I'm sorry. I didn't know what to do." We talked for hours, going in circles, the same arguments, the same fears. But as the night wore on, something shifted. We started to see not just the challenges, but the possibilities. Maybe, just maybe, we could do this together. In a decision that surprised both of us, we agreed to start over. We decided to get married, but this time, we'd do it our way, away from all the drama and judgment. A simple courthouse ceremony, just us and a couple of friends. It was quick, maybe a bit impulsive, but it felt right. The day we got married was nothing like I'd ever imagined. No fancy dress, no big party. Just the two of us, exchanging vows in a small, stuffy room. But when I looked into Jake's eyes, I knew it was perfect. We kept it a secret, not ready to deal with the fallout from his family, especially Mrs. Green. We needed time to adjust, to prepare for the baby, to figure out how we were going to handle everything. It was our little bubble of happiness, fragile, but ours. Jake and I were living in our little world, trying to prepare for the baby's arrival. But we both knew we couldn't keep our secret forever. The day finally came when Jake decided it was time to tell his parents. "We gotta do it, Bella. They need to know about the baby, about us," he insisted one morning, a determined look on his face. I was scared, to say the least. "But what about your mom? You know she's gonna flip." He took my hands in his. "I'll handle Mom. You just focus on you and the baby." So, we went to his parents' house. My heart was pounding as we walked up the driveway. The door opened, and there stood Mrs. Green, looking as stern as ever. "Jacob, what are you doing here?" "And you brought her," she said, eyeing me with disdain. "Mom, we've got something to tell you." "It's important," Jake said, stepping in front of me slightly. She let us in, the curiosity clear on her face. We all sat down, the tension thick in the air. Jake took a deep breath and began. "Mom, Dad, Bella, and I got married a few months back. And we're expecting a baby." There was a moment of stunned silence before Mrs. Green erupted. "Married? A baby? How could you be so irresponsible?" "Mom, it's not like that. We love each other. We're happy," Jake tried to explain. "Happy? Look at her. She's trapped you with this child," Mrs. Green accused, pointing a finger at me. I felt my face heat up. I didn't trap anyone. This baby is a blessing, not a trap. "Don't talk back to me, girl. I know your type," she snapped. Jake stood up, his face red with anger. "Enough, Mom. This is my life, my wife, my child. If you can't accept that, then maybe we don't need to be part of yours." The room fell silent, Mrs. Green's face red with anger, but there was a flicker of something else, maybe fear, maybe realization. Mr. Green, who had been silent till now, put a hand on her shoulder, a silent plea. She looked at him, then back at us, her face softening just a fraction. I need time to process this." We left shortly after, the air between us heavy but hopeful. As we drove away, Jake squeezed my hand. That went better than expected. I laughed, despite everything. Yeah, if you consider World War III better than expected. But it was out now, the truth. We were married, expecting a baby, and for better or worse, his family knew. It felt like a weight had been lifted, but at the same time, a new worry had settled in. How would Mrs. Green react once the news really sunk in? Would she come around, or would she be an ever-present thorn in our side? Only time would tell, but for now, we had each other, and that was enough. As we drove home, the sun setting in the distance, I felt a sense of peace. We were together, we were strong, and no matter what came our way, we'd face it together, as a family. A few weeks had passed since the big reveal to Jake's parents. Things were quiet, almost eerily so. Then, one afternoon, Mrs. Green showed up at our door, unannounced, with a homemade cake in hand. "Bella, I baked this for you. A peace offering, let's say," she said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. I was taken aback, not sure what to make of this sudden gesture. Thanks, Mrs. Green. That's unexpected." She smiled, a bit too sweetly. "Call me Mother, dear. After all, we are family now." After some awkward small talk, she left, leaving the cake on the kitchen counter. I invited a friend over to share the cake. "Hey, Lisa, wanna come over for some cake?" It's a long story. Lisa arrived, and I cut the cake, serving us both a piece. But as fate would have it, she was on a new diet kick and refused at the last minute. "You know what, I'll take it home for later. My cheat day's tomorrow." She laughed, wrapping up a big slice. I shrugged and took a bite of mine. It was delicious, almond flavor bursting in my mouth. But as the evening wore on, I started feeling odd, queasy. I chalked it up to pregnancy nausea and went to bed early. But the nausea didn't go away, it got worse. By midnight, I was violently ill, and Jake rushed me to the hospital. After what felt like endless tests and worried looks from doctors, they told us the shocking news. There was a toxic substance in my system, something commonly used in gardening to kill pests. Jake's face went white as he realized the implication. The cake, my mom. I was too weak to respond, a cold dread settling in my stomach. Had Mrs. Green really tried to harm me, to harm her own grandchild? I was kept in the hospital overnight, and by morning, I was feeling a bit better, but the emotional toll was immense. Jake was a mess, torn between worry for me and disbelief that his mother could do such a thing. We were talking on the phone about it, Jake's voice heavy with concern. We need to figure out what to do next, when suddenly the door to my room creaked open, and in walked Mrs. Green. I quickly muted the phone but didn't hang up, Jake still listening in. "Bella, how are you feeling, dear?" she asked, her voice dripping with faux concern. I looked at her, feeling a mix of anger and disbelief. "I've been better," I said, coldly. She tooted. "Such a shame about the sickness." "And the baby?" "The baby is fine," I replied, watching her reaction closely. Her face faltered for just a moment, a flash of disappointment crossing her features. "Well, that's good to hear," she said, but the words felt hollow. Then, with a smirk, she added, "Of course, you have no proof of what caused your little incident." I made sure of that when I threw away the rest of that cake first thing this morning. My heart raced, Jake still on the line, hearing every word. She had just admitted to it, not realizing the call was still connected. As she turned to leave, I looked down at the phone, a plan forming in my mind. Mrs. Green might think she's covered her tracks, but she was wrong. We had her confession, and now it was time to make her face the consequences. After Mrs. Green left the hospital room, I called Lisa, who thankfully hadn't eaten her piece yet. She was horrified by the news, and agreed to bring the cake to the police as evidence. Then I dialed Jake again. "Jake, did you hear all that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah, every single word," he replied, anger seething through his tone. "I can't believe she'd go this far. I'm coming back to the hospital, and we're going to the police. We've got her now, Bella." By the time Jake arrived, I had managed to steady my nerves. Together, we went to the police station, the phone recording in hand. The officers listened intently, their expressions growing grimmer with every word Mrs. Green had unwittingly spilled. They assured us they would investigate immediately. The next few days were a blur of police visits, interviews, and a growing sense of dread about what was to come. Mrs. Green was brought in for questioning, and with the evidence stacked against her, she had no choice but to confess to her horrendous act. The news of her arrest spread quickly, and suddenly, the whole town was buzzing about the scandal. Jake stayed by my side through it all, his support unwavering. "I'm so sorry, Bella. I never thought she'd do something like this." "I know, Jake. But we're together in this, that's what matters," I reassured him, squeezing his hand. The trial date was set quickly, given the severity of the crime. Mrs. Green faced the judge, her usual stern demeanor replaced by a look of defeat. The evidence was undeniable, and she was found guilty of attempted poisoning. The sentence was harsh, but just, given the potential consequences of her actions. As we walked out of the courtroom, Jake and I both felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. It was over, but at such a cost. His mother, the woman who had raised him, was now behind bars because of her own twisted actions. We decided it was time to move on, to focus on the future and the arrival of our baby. The house felt quieter, the air lighter, as if a dark cloud had been lifted. Our friends and family rallied around us, their support a constant source of comfort. One evening, as we sat on the porch, Jake wrapped his arm around me. "We've been through hell, Bella, but we made it. I love you, and I can't wait to start this new chapter with our little one." I leaned into him, my head resting on his shoulder. "Me too, Jake. It's going to be a fresh start for all of us." The baby kicked, as if in agreement, and we both laughed. It was a sound of pure joy, a sign that despite everything, we were going to be okay. As the sun set, painting the sky in hues of pink and orange, I realized that justice had been served, not just in the courtroom, but in our lives too. We had been tested, pushed to our limits, but in the end, we emerged stronger, united, and ready to face whatever the future held.
Life at 40 was exactly as I had meticulously planned it: a successful career as a department head, a comfortable home, and a shiny car in the driveway. Love and romance? Those were chapters one had skipped, focusing instead on my spreadsheets and meetings. Until one unassuming evening at my friend Lisa's party, where my well-ordered world took an unexpected turn. "Anna, you need to get out more," Lisa had insisted over the phone. "It'll be good for you." I had reluctantly agreed, not really expecting much from the evening. As I arrived at the party, the atmosphere was buzzing with laughter and chatter. I felt out of place, awkwardly holding a glass of wine, scanning the room for a familiar face. That's when I noticed him. He was in the middle of a lively group, but somehow seemed separate from them. There was an ease about him that caught my attention. He walked over to me, a confident yet friendly smile on his face. "Hi, I'm Tom," he said, offering his hand. "I don't think we've met before." "I'm Anna," I replied, shaking his hand. His grip was firm, reassuring. "First time at one of Lisa's infamous parties?" he asked, his eyes twinkling with amusement. "Is it that obvious?" I said, trying to match his light tone. "Just a lucky guess," Tom chuckled. "So, what brings you here tonight? Friend of the host?" "Yes, Lisa and I go way back. But parties aren't really my scene. I'm more the type to curl up with a good book at home," I admitted. "Ah, a fellow book lover. What do you like to read?" Tom asked, leaning against the wall, completely engaged in our conversation. "Mysteries mostly. There's something about unraveling a puzzle that's relaxing after a day of work," I said, feeling a bit more at ease. "I get that. I'm more into biographies, though. Real-life stories have a certain appeal, don't you think?" Tom said. The conversation flowed effortlessly from there. We discussed everything from our favorite authors to our jobs. I learned he was a graphic designer, passionate about his work, and surprisingly, 5 years younger than me. His sense of humor was a breath of fresh air. As the night wore on, we somehow found ourselves tucked away in a quieter corner of the room, lost in conversation. It was uncanny how natural it felt to talk to him, as if we'd known each other for years rather than hours. When it was time to leave, Tom insisted on walking me to my car. "I hope I get to see you again, Anna," he said earnestly as we stood beside my car. "I think I'd like that," I found myself saying, surprised by my own willingness to step out of my comfort zone. "Good night, Tom." Driving home, my mind replayed our conversation, his laughter, the ease of the evening. It was unsettling yet exhilarating. For the first time in a long while, I felt a spark of something new, something unexpected. After that party, Tom and I started seeing each other more. It wasn't like anything I had experienced before. He was thoughtful in ways that caught me off guard. He'd surprise me with my favorite coffee at work or send me texts just to say he was thinking of me. One evening, he invited me over for dinner. I walked into his apartment to find he had cooked an entire meal. "I hope you're hungry," he said, grinning from ear to ear. "I'm impressed. I didn't know you could cook," I said, taking in the spread on the table. "There's a lot you don't know about me," he replied with a wink. "For instance, I make a mean lasagna." As we ate, he told me stories about his family, his dreams, his fears. It was intimate, real. After dinner, we settled on the couch, a comfortable silence enveloping us. "You know, Anna, I never thought I'd meet someone like you," Tom said, looking into my eyes. "Like me? How so?" I asked, feeling a warmth spread through me. "Someone who's not just about the surface stuff. You see the world differently. It's refreshing," he said, brushing a strand of hair from my face. I didn't know what to say, so I just smiled, feeling a flutter in my stomach. Weeks turned into months, and our relationship deepened. Tom was charming, not just to me but to everyone around him. He even won over my parents when I introduced him. My mom, who was usually hard to please, said, he's a keeper, that one. But the real turning point came 6 months into our relationship. It was a regular evening. We were walking in the park after dinner. "Anna, I've been thinking," Tom started, sounding serious for once. "I don't want to spend another day without you. Marry me." His proposal caught me off guard. "Tom, are you serious? We've only been together for 6 months. I know it's fast. But when something feels right, why wait?" he argued, his eyes searching mine for an answer. I looked at him, this man who had unexpectedly become my world. "Yes," I found myself saying, "yes, I'll marry you." Married life started like something out of a storybook. Tom and I were in our own little world, wrapped up in the bliss that comes with being newlyweds. In those first few months, Tom was incredibly attentive. He'd surprise me with little notes hidden around the house, each one making my day a little brighter. One evening, I found a note on the bathroom mirror. "Meet me in the backyard," it read. Curious, I made my way outside to find Tom had set up a makeshift projector. "Movie night under the stars," he announced proudly. I couldn't help but laugh. "You really go all out, don't you?" "Only the best for my wife," he replied with a wink. As we cuddled under a blanket watching an old classic, I remember thinking I had never been this happy. But it wasn't just the grand gestures. It was the small things too. How he'd make coffee just the way I liked it, or how we'd cook together, dancing around the kitchen to some old tune. One day, as we were making dinner, I playfully splashed him with water. "Hey, what was that for?" he exclaimed, pretending to be offended. "Just keeping you on your toes," I shot back, laughing. He came over, a mock stern look on his face. "You're going to pay for that," he said, before breaking into a smile and pulling me into a hug. Life with Tom felt easy, like everything had fallen into place. Even when we disagreed, it was never anything serious. We had this rhythm, this understanding between us that felt natural. But as perfect as everything seemed, there were moments that gave me pause. Like when Tom casually suggested that we should have a joint bank account for convenience. I remember frowning slightly at the idea. "Isn't it a bit soon for that? We're doing fine managing our finances separately." He shrugged, a carefree smile on his face. "It's just easier this way, isn't it? One less thing to worry about." I hesitated but eventually agreed. After all, we were married now. Sharing a bank account seemed like a logical step in our partnership. The shift was subtle at first. After we merged our bank accounts, I noticed small discrepancies in our finances. Tom started spending more, often on things that seemed extravagant. One evening, I decided to bring it up. We were sitting in the living room, bills scattered on the coffee table. "Tom, I've been noticing some large amounts coming out of our account lately. Fancy suits, high-end gadgets, it's a bit much, don't you think?" Tom looked up from his phone, seemingly unfazed. "Oh, that. Well, I need to look the part, don't I? You can't have your husband looking shabby." I frowned. "But we need to be smart about our spending. We have a mortgage and other responsibilities." He waved his hand dismissively. "Relax, Anna. We're doing fine. Don't be such a worrywart." That conversation left a sour taste in my mouth. Tom's attitude towards money was so different from mine. I was used to saving, planning for the future, while he seemed to live in the moment, unconcerned about tomorrow. As weeks passed, Tom's behavior started to change in other ways too. He seemed less interested in spending time with me, often opting to go out with his friends instead. Then came the day when Tom dropped another bombshell. He came home early from work, a buoyant smile on his face. "Guess what? I've decided to go part-time at work. I'll be working only till noon," he announced cheerfully as he raided the fridge. I stared at him, dumbfounded. "Part-time? Why? We haven't discussed this." He shrugged, grabbing a beer. "I figured since you're doing so well with your job, I could take it easy. Plus, I want to focus on my hobbies, maybe hit the gym more. I felt a surge of frustration. Tom, we're a team. Decisions like this should be made together. He looked at me, his expression one of annoyance. Why are you making a big deal out of this? It's not like we can't afford it. The conversation escalated from there, ending with Tom storming out of the room. I sat there, feeling a mix of anger and disbelief. It was around that time that I suggested maybe we should start thinking about having a child, hoping it would bring us closer. Tom's reaction, however, was far from what I expected. A child? Are you serious, Anna? I think you're a bit too old for that, he said bluntly, not even looking up from his phone. His words stung. I was taken aback by his insensitivity. Too old? That's a harsh thing to say, Tom. He shrugged. It's the truth. Besides, I'm not ready to be tied down with kids. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This wasn't the Tom I married. He used to be considerate, loving. Now, he was turning into someone I hardly recognized. As the days turned into weeks, the distance between us grew. The man I fell in love with was fading away, replaced by someone who seemed to care only about himself. I started to feel more like an ATM than a wife, a provider rather than a partner. The changes in Tom were becoming more pronounced, and it felt like our marriage was on a slippery slope. His part-time job meant he was home more, but not in the way I had hoped. He spent most of his time at the gym or hanging out with friends, leaving me to handle the household chores. One evening, I came home exhausted from work, only to find the house in a mess. Tom was sprawled on the couch, scrolling through his phone. "You're home early," I commented, dropping my bag. He didn't look up. "Yeah." Gym was crowded. Decided to skip it. I sighed, looking around. "Tom, since you're home more, do you think you could help out with some of these chores?" He frowned, his tone defensive. "What? Now you want me to be a house husband? That's not my thing, Anna." I felt my patience wearing thin. It's not about being a house husband. It's about helping each other out. He shrugged, unmoved. "I don't know, Anna. I have other things to do." I bit back a sharper retort, feeling a growing sense of frustration and loneliness. It was like talking to a wall. He just didn't get it, or he didn't care. I couldn't tell which was worse. The situation worsened when I suggested he could use his free time for something productive, like taking care of the house or cooking. "Me? Cook? Come on, Anna, you know I'm no good in the kitchen." He laughed it off. "But you could learn. It would be helpful," I pressed, hoping he'd see reason. He scoffed. "I have better things to do with my time." I felt a surge of anger. "Like what? Going to the gym and hanging out with your friends?" He rolled his eyes. "You just don't get it, do you? I need my space, Anna." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was not the partnership I had signed up for. I was working full-time, managing the house, and now, apparently, I was expected to be okay, with his complete lack of contribution. The final straw came when I found out about his demands at home. One evening, I came home late from a particularly grueling day at work. "Hey, what's for dinner?" Tom asked as soon as I walked in. I was taken aback. "I just got home. I thought maybe you'd have something ready since you were home all day." He laughed, as if I had made a joke. "Me? Cook? Come on, Anna. That's your thing." I stood there, disbelief and anger swirling inside me. "My thing? What about teamwork, Tom? What about supporting each other?" He just shrugged, completely indifferent to my feelings. I went to bed that night feeling more alone than ever. The man I had married, the man I thought I knew, was becoming a stranger to me. Our conversations were now either superficial or arguments. The warmth and connection we once shared seemed like a distant memory. One afternoon, while doing a deep clean, I moved the bed to get to the dust underneath and spotted something glinting against the wall. Reaching down, my heart sank as I picked up an earring that certainly wasn't mine. The cold wave of realization hit me hard. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I turned the earring over in my fingers, a storm of questions and fears swirling in my mind. When Tom returned home later, I confronted him directly. "Tom, I found this earring under our bed. It's not mine. Can you explain?" He glanced at the earring with a nervous laugh. "Where did that come from? Maybe it's from one of your friends." I knew none of my friends owned anything like this. "No, Tom. My friends haven't been over in ages. And they don't wear this style." He gave a casual shrug, but I could tell he was uneasy. "I don't know, Anna. Maybe it's yours and you forgot about it." I felt frustration building inside me. "I know what my jewelry looks like, Tom. This isn't mine." There was a tense silence. Finally, Tom sighed and admitted, "Okay, it probably belongs to a friend of mine." "A friend?" My voice trembled with a mix of disbelief and hurt. "Yeah, she must have dropped it when she was here," he said, avoiding my gaze. The room seemed to spin as I processed his words. "When she was here? In our house? In our bedroom?" He gave a half-hearted defense. "It's not a big deal, Anna. It was just a visit." I was incensed. "Just a visit? You brought another woman into our home, our bedroom? That's a big deal, Tom." He tried to downplay it, but I could see right through his act. "You're overreacting, Anna. It was nothing." The conversation escalated from there, ending with Tom storming out and me left alone, feeling a deep sense of betrayal. That night, as I lay in bed, Tom's admission replayed in my mind. I realized that my marriage had hit a point of no return. I couldn't just brush this under the rug. I needed to know the extent of Tom's betrayal, to understand what I was dealing with. The next day, I picked up the phone and dialed an old friend. He was someone I had known for years, someone discreet and skilled in handling sensitive situations. "Hey, it's Anna. I need a favor, something personal. I need to know what's really going on when I'm not around. Can you help?" There was a brief pause on the other end. "Of course, Anna. I know just how to handle this. Let's meet and discuss the details." Then came the incident that broke the camel's back. My father had an accident and needed a wheelchair. I found a state-of-the-art model that would give him some independence, but it was expensive. I didn't hesitate, though. This was my dad, and he deserved the best. I was discussing it on the phone with my mom when Tom walked in. "What's that about a wheelchair?" he asked, a curious look on his face. I hung up and turned to him. "My dad had an accident. I'm buying him a modern wheelchair to help him get around." He raised his eyebrows. "Sounds expensive. How much?" I told him the amount, and his reaction was shocking. "Are you crazy? That's a lot of money, Anna." I was taken aback. "It's for my dad, Tom. He needs it." He scoffed. "Your dad's old, Anna. Why waste so much money on a wheelchair? You should be saving that for us, for our future." I felt a surge of anger. "It's my money, Tom. And it's for my dad. I'm not going to skimp on something he needs." Tom's face turned red. "Your money? What about our money? You know what you should be buying instead? That motorcycle I've been looking at. That's a better investment than some old man's wheelchair." I couldn't believe my ears. "A motorcycle? You think a motorcycle is more important than my injured father?" He shrugged. "Yeah, I do. I work hard. I deserve it." I shook my head in disbelief. "You barely work, Tom. And even if you did, my father's needs come before your wants." He got in my face, his voice raised. "You're being selfish, Anna. All you care about is your family. What about me? What about what I want?" I stood my ground. This isn't about you, Tom. This is about my father needing help, and I'm going to give it to him, whether you like it or not. Tom laughed mockingly. You know what, Anna? I married you for your money. You're just an old, ugly woman who I thought would be easy to control. But I see now you're just a fool. If you don't buy me that motorcycle, I'll divorce you. And good luck getting married again at your age. Let's see who'd want you after me. I felt a surge of anger mixed with determination. Reaching into the drawer of the coffee table, I pulled out a folder and slammed it onto the table. These are pictures from a private detective, Tom. They show exactly what you've been up to when I'm not around, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. His smirk faltered as he flipped through the photos, his face turning pale. The images were undeniable proof of his infidelity, his betrayal laid bare for him to see. And this, I continued, pulling out another set of documents, is our divorce paperwork. I'm done, Tom. I'm done being disrespected, lied to, and used. He looked up from the photos, his earlier bravado gone. Anna, please, we can talk about this. I didn't mean those things I said. But it was too late. I had seen the truth behind the man I married, and there was no going back. I've made my decision, Tom. It's over, I said firmly. As he left the house that day, the folder and divorce papers in his hands, I felt a profound sense of relief mixed with sorrow. It was the end of a painful chapter in my life, but also the beginning of a new, albeit uncertain, journey. The divorce proceedings were nothing short of a roller coaster. Tom, in a desperate attempt to salvage what he could, demanded alimony, citing the stark difference between our salaries. His audacity knew no bounds, and the trial turned into a battleground of accusations and legal maneuvers. I sat in the courtroom, my lawyer by my side, clutching the folder that held all the evidence of Tom's infidelity and betrayal. As his demands for alimony echoed through the room, I felt a mix of disbelief and determination. This was the man I had loved, and now he was trying to exploit me one last time. When it was my turn, I presented everything, the photographs from the private detective, bank statements showing his extravagant spending, and testimonies about his lifestyle. The evidence was overwhelming, painting a clear picture of a man who had taken advantage of my trust and love for his own gain. The judge listened intently, flipping through the evidence, his expression unreadable. After what seemed like an eternity, he finally spoke. The court ruled in my favor. Tom's claims for alimony were dismissed, and the divorce was granted on my terms. I remember exhaling a breath I didn't realize I was holding, a weight lifting off my shoulders. It was over. The legal ties that bound me to Tom were severed, and I was free. In the aftermath of the trial, life slowly started to return to a new kind of normal. I focused on rebuilding myself, reconnecting with the parts of me that had been lost in the shadows of my marriage. One day, as I was having coffee with a friend, she mentioned Tom. Have you heard about your ex? He's in deep trouble. Debt's piling up, and I heard he's even hiding from some angry husbands. I sipped my coffee, feeling a sense of closure. Really? Can't say I'm surprised. He made his bed, now he has to lie in it. The conversation moved on, but a part of me felt a sense of vindication. Tom's actions had finally caught up with him. It was a harsh reality, but one he had brought upon himself. As I walked home that day, the sun setting in the distance, I felt lighter. The chapter of my life that was Tom was closed, a bittersweet ending to a story that had started with so much promise.
I sat on the worn-out couch, a couch that once held stories of laughter and late-night movies. Now, it was just an old piece of furniture in a room filled with memories of a happier past. Sophie, my 3-year-old angel, was upstairs, her gentle breaths a stark contrast to the heavy air of our home. I glanced at the clock again. It was past 10 p.m. Mark was late, as had become his norm. The sound of the key turning in the lock finally broke the silence. I stood up, smoothing my shirt, not sure why I still bothered to look presentable for him. "Mark," I called out as he stepped in, looking more a stranger than the man I married. You're late. He didn't meet my eyes, just grunted a response. Work. It's always work. His voice, once filled with warmth and affection, now carried a cold, distant tone. I tried to sound casual. Sophie asked about you today. She wanted to know when Daddy would be home. He shrugged off his coat, hanging it carelessly on the rack. Kids ask a lot of things. Doesn't mean we always have answers. I felt a twinge of pain in my heart. Maybe we could do something this weekend? Just the three of us? Sophie would love that. Mark snorted, his tone laced with sarcasm. A family outing? With everything that's going on? Don't be naive, Lily. My hands trembled slightly. This wasn't the man I fell in love with. It's important, Mark. She needs her father. He walked to the fridge, pulling out a beer. What she needs is a miracle. Not me playing pretend in a park. I couldn't hold back my tears. She's your daughter, Mark. How can you be so cold? He took a swig of his beer, avoiding my gaze. I'm being realistic, Lily. This isn't the life I wanted. A sick child, a house that feels more like a hospital. I followed him into the kitchen, my voice rising. And what about me? Do you think I enjoy watching our daughter suffer? Do you think this is the life I dreamed of? Mark slammed the beer bottle on the counter. I don't know, Lily. I really don't. But I know I can't do this anymore. I felt a surge of anger. You want to walk away? From your own child? He drained his beer in one long gulp. I need space. I can't deal with this, suffocation. Suffocation? I echoed, disbelief in my voice. Is that what your family is to you now? Mark turned away, his shoulders tense. It's not just that. It's everything. The constant hospital visits, the medical bills, the way our lives revolve around Sophie's illness. I didn't sign up for this. I was at a loss for words. How had our love turned into this bitter reality? So, what's your plan, Mark? Leave us? Start over somewhere else? He didn't answer, just walked past me, his footsteps heavy against the wooden floor. I stood there, a mix of emotions churning inside me. Anger, sadness, and a profound sense of betrayal. Later, as I lay in bed, the space next to me cold and empty, I listened to the distant sound of Mark's TV from the other room. The divide between us had grown too vast to bridge. The man I married, the father of my child, was now a stranger living under the same roof. The hospital room was stark and clinical, a sharp contrast to the warm, lived-in feel of our home. Sophie lay in the small hospital bed, her tiny chest rising and falling steadily. I sat beside her, holding her small hand, trying to draw strength from her innocent slumber. Nurse Janet walked in, her face a mask of professional kindness. How's our brave girl doing today, Lily? I managed a weary smile. She's a fighter. Always has been. Janet checked Sophie's vitals, her movements efficient and gentle. She's in good hands here. The surgery team is one of the best. I nodded, my throat tight with unspoken fears. I know. I just wish Mark could be here more. She keeps asking for him. Janet gave me a sympathetic look. Fathers often find it hard to cope with these situations. But you're doing an amazing job. I sighed, feeling the weight of loneliness. It's hard doing it alone, you know? He's just not the same anymore. As if on cue, Mark walked in, his arrival less comforting than I had hoped. He glanced at Sophie and then at me, his expression unreadable. How is she? The same, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. He fiddled with his phone, avoiding eye contact. I can't stay long. Work's crazy. I felt a flash of anger. Work, right. Because that's what's important right now. Mark looked up, his eyes cold. What do you want from me, Lily? To sit here and watch her sleep? I bit back a sharp retort, focusing on Sophie instead. She asked for you today, Mark. She misses her dad. He shrugged, his detachment like a physical barrier. I'm here, aren't I? Before I could respond, Sophie stirred, her little voice weak but clear. Daddy? Mark's face softened momentarily as he moved closer to her. "Hey, princess. Daddy's here." Sophie smiled faintly, reaching out for him. "Stay with me, Daddy?" I watched, a mix of hope and sorrow in my heart. Mark hesitated, then sat on the edge of the bed. "I can't stay long, Sophie. Daddy has to work." Her smile faded, a look of understanding far beyond her years in her eyes. "It's okay, Daddy. I love you." Mark forced a smile, patting her hand. "I love you too, kiddo." As he stood to leave, I felt a surge of resentment. "She needs you, Mark. We need you." He paused, his back to us. "I'm doing what I can, Lily." But his words rang hollow in the sterile room. I watched him leave, a familiar sense of abandonment settling over me. Sophie's hand gripped mine, her small presence a reminder of the fight ahead of us. The room fell silent again, save for the beeping of the monitors. I leaned closer to Sophie, whispering promises of better days. Promises I wasn't sure I could keep. But in that moment, all I had was hope and the unwavering love for my daughter. The silence in the room was broken by a call from my friend Lisa, who worked as a realtor for a local company. I sat in the dimly lit hospital cafeteria, clutching a lukewarm cup of coffee. My mind was a whirlwind of betrayal and shock after Lisa's call. Mark was selling our house, our home. Anger and disbelief swirled within me, fueling a determination I hadn't felt in months. Lisa slid into the seat across from me, her expression a mix of concern and anger. "I can't believe he's doing this, Lily. Selling your house while you're here, with Sophie." I took a deep breath, trying to steady my shaking hands. "I need you to delay the sale, Lisa. Buy me some time." Lisa nodded, her eyes hard. "I'll do what I can, but we don't have much time. He's pushing for a quick sale." I leaned forward, my voice low and firm. "I won't let him get away with this. He thinks he can just steal my house and run off with whoever she is?" Lisa reached out, her hand gripping mine. "Do you have a plan?" A plan. The word echoed in my mind. I had been reactive for too long, letting life and Mark's indifference dictate my days. But not anymore. I'm going to fight back. I'll start by talking to a lawyer. There has to be a way to stop this. Lisa's expression shifted to one of support. "Good. You fight this, Lily. And I'm here, every step of the way." I nodded, feeling a spark of resolve. "And I'll need to gather evidence. Proof of his betrayal, the fraud. Anything that can help my case." "Let's start with the house sale," Lisa suggested. "I'll dig up everything I can on the buyer, the deal, anything out of the ordinary." I sipped my coffee, its bitterness mirroring my mood. "I can't believe he's doing this to me, to Sophie. After everything we've been through." Lisa's hand tightened around mine. "He's a coward, Lily. And he's going to regret underestimating you." I stood up, my resolve strengthening. "He's going to pay for this, Lisa. He's going to pay for hurting my daughter, for trying to take away our home. I'll make sure of it." Lisa stood with me, her eyes fierce. "Let's do this, Lily. Let's show him he picked the wrong woman to mess with." Hidden from view, I stood just outside the realtor's office, my heart racing. Through the slightly ajar door, I could hear the voices inside. Mark was there, his tone smooth and confident as he spoke to the potential buyers. And she was there too, his mistress, her laughter tinkling like a bell, completely oblivious to the storm she was a part of. I watched as Mark handed over a stack of papers to the buyers. His charm was on full display, the same charm that had once swept me off my feet. "This is a fantastic opportunity," he was saying. "A beautiful house, great location, you're getting a steal." The buyers, a middle-aged couple, nodded, their expressions a mix of eagerness and caution. The wife leafed through the documents, her husband leaning over to look. "It all seems in order," she murmured. Mark's mistress, a young woman with bright red lipstick, laughed and leaned closer to Mark. "Told you it would be easy," she whispered, loud enough for me to hear. I felt a surge of anger, but I forced myself to stay put, to observe. This was about gathering evidence, understanding the depth of Mark's deceit. The husband looked up, a question in his eyes. And the current owner? She's agreed to all this? Mark's response was swift, a lie so smooth it sounded like truth. Absolutely. She's moved on. Wants to sell the place quickly. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. How could he lie so blatantly? The audacity of it made my blood boil. Lisa, who was playing her part in my game, intervened. We can proceed with the sale as soon as you're ready. The couple exchanged a look, then nodded. We're ready. This is a deal we don't want to miss. I watched as they began to sign the papers, the finality of each stroke like a dagger in my heart. But I needed to stay focused. This was not the time for emotions, it was the time for action. Mark's laughter brought me back to the moment. He was toasting with the buyers, his mistress clinging to his arm. To new beginnings, he said, raising his glass. I stepped into the room, my gaze fixed on Mark. Enjoying yourself, Mark? Everyone turned, shock and confusion on their faces. Mark's smile faltered. Lily, what are you doing here? I walked up to them, my steps firm. I'm here to stop you from making the biggest mistake of your life. Mark's mistress scoffed, rolling her eyes. What are you talking about? The deal is done. I smiled, but it was cold, devoid of any warmth. Is it, now? Because I don't remember signing off on selling my house. The buyers looked uncomfortable, exchanging glances. We were told everything was in order, the husband said, his voice uncertain. Mark stepped forward, trying to assert control. Lily, you're confused. This is for the best. I shook my head. No, Mark. The only confusion here is yours if you think you can forge my signature and get away with it. The room went silent. Mark's face turned a shade paler. You can't prove anything, he blurted out. I pulled out a set of documents from my bag. Actually, I can. And I have. These are the real papers. The ones you have are forgeries. Mark's mistress tugged at his arm. Mark, what's she talking about? Tell me this isn't true. But Mark was speechless, his usual confidence shattered. That's when the door opened, and 2 police officers walked in. One of the officers looked directly at Mark. Mark Johnson? You're under arrest for fraud and forgery. Mark's face drained of color. He looked at me, his eyes filled with disbelief. You called the cops? I met his gaze, my voice steady. Yes, I did. You broke the law, Mark. And you tried to steal my home. As the officers handcuffed Mark, his mistress started to cry, her makeup smearing. The buyers quickly gathered their things, eager to distance themselves from the situation. One of the officers turned to me. We'll need your statement, ma'am. I nodded, feeling a sense of justice. Of course, officer. As they led Mark away, he looked back at me, his expression a mix of anger and regret. But I felt no sympathy. He had made his choice, and now he was facing the consequences. Lisa smiled at me, nodding her head approvingly. I smiled back and left the office, a weight lifted off my shoulders. I had stood up for myself and Sophie. I had fought back. And this was just the beginning. After Mark's arrest, I found myself in the lawyer's office, the walls lined with law books and the air heavy with the scent of leather. My lawyer, Mr. Thompson, was a no-nonsense man in his 50s, his face etched with lines of experience. He glanced at the file in front of him. Lily, your husband's actions have opened up a big can of worms. The fraud charge is serious. I sat across from him, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. I know, Mr. Thompson. But I couldn't let him get away with it. Not after everything. Mr. Thompson nodded, understanding in his eyes. I respect that. Now, about the divorce and custody battle. You're in a strong position, but it won't be easy. I leaned forward. I'm ready for it. I have to do this for Sophie. She deserves a stable home. The lawyer shuffled some papers. What about alimony and child support? Given Mark's likely incarceration, it's going to be complicated. I sighed, a mix of determination and sadness in my voice. I want what's fair for Sophie. She's my priority. As for Mark, he made his choices. Mr. Thompson looked at me, his expression serious. You're a strong woman, Lily. We'll fight for what's right for you and your daughter. As I left the office, my phone rang. It was Mark. I hesitated but answered. What do you want, Mark? His voice came through, laced with desperation. Lily, please. I messed up. I know that. But don't take Sophie away from me. I stopped in my tracks, anger rising. You thought about Sophie when you tried to sell our house? When you spent your days with that woman? He was silent for a moment. I lost my way. But I'm her father, Lily. I love her. I clenched my phone tighter. Love isn't just words, Mark. It's actions. You failed us both. Mark's voice cracked. I'll do anything to make it right. Please, Lily. I shook my head, even though he couldn't see me. It's too late for that. You'll see Sophie, but only under supervised visits. That's non-negotiable. There was a pause, then a soft, defeated sigh from Mark. Okay, I understand. The days were a whirlwind. I spent most of my time with Sophie, ensuring she felt loved and secure amidst the chaos. Her laughter was a balm to my wounded heart. One afternoon, while Sophie napped, I received a call from my sister, Laura. Hey, Lily, how are you holding up? Laura's voice was always a mix of concern and strength. I sighed, staring out the window. I'm managing, Laura. It's tough, but I'm getting through it. Laura was silent for a moment. I heard about Mark. I'm so sorry, Lily, but I'm proud of you for standing up to him. I smiled faintly. Thanks, Laura. It's hard, but I have to be strong for Sophie. She needs me now more than ever. Laura's voice softened. And what about you? Who's being strong for Lily? Her question caught me off guard. I had been so focused on Sophie and the legal battle that I hadn't given much thought to myself. I don't know, Laura. I guess I haven't had time to think about that. Laura was firm. You need to take care of yourself too, Lily. You can't pour from an empty cup. I knew she was right. I'll try, Laura. It's just, everything feels overwhelming right now. You're not alone, Lily. Remember that. I'm here for you, always. The next day, I visited a therapist, Dr. Martin. His office was a small, cozy room with soft lighting and a comfortable couch. He greeted me with a warm smile. Lily, it's good to meet you. How can I help you today? I took a deep breath, unloading my worries and fears. I just feel so lost, Dr. Martin. Everything I knew, everything I trusted, it's all been turned upside down. Dr. Martin nodded, his voice gentle. It's understandable to feel that way after what you've been through. But it's important to remember that this is a chapter in your life, not the whole story. His words resonated with me. Over the next few weeks, I started to take small steps towards reclaiming my life. I joined a support group for single parents. The first meeting was daunting, but as I listened to others share their stories, I realized I wasn't alone. Welcome, Lily, said the group leader, a kind woman named Beth. We're here to support each other, to share our struggles and our victories. I shared my story, my voice steady but filled with emotion. The group listened, their faces a tapestry of empathy and understanding. After the meeting, a woman named Sarah approached me. Your story is inspiring, Lily. You're stronger than you realize. Her words lifted my spirits. Maybe I was stronger than I thought. Maybe, just maybe, I could turn this painful chapter into a story of resilience and hope. Sitting in my living room, the early morning light filtering through the curtains, I reflected on the tumultuous journey that had led to this moment of tranquility. The divorce papers, now signed and finalized, lay on the coffee table, a testament to my newfound independence. The legal battle had been long and arduous. I had sued Mark for a substantial portion of his property, determined to secure a stable future for Sophie and myself. The court's decision had been in our favor. Mark, now serving a real sentence for his fraudulent activities, had lost much of what he had once held dear. His mistress, caught in the web of deceit, was slapped with a hefty fine, payable to me as restitution. I remembered sitting in the courtroom, watching Mark and his mistress turn on each other, each trying to deflect blame. There was no love lost between them, only bitter accusations and desperate attempts to save themselves. Watching them, I felt a sense of satisfaction. They had gotten what they deserved. Their betrayal and greed had led them to this downfall. But amidst the chaos of legal proceedings and emotional upheavals, there was a silver lining. Sophie, my brave little girl, had made a swift recovery after her surgery. Her laughter and energy filled our home with a warmth that had been missing for far too long. As I sipped my morning coffee, I thought about our future. It was a future I had fought hard for, a future that seemed bright and promising. Sophie was my priority, my beacon of hope. Together, we had weathered a storm and emerged stronger. I glanced at the pictures on the mantel, images of Sophie and me at the park, at the zoo, smiling and carefree. They were more than just photographs, they were reminders of our resilience, our ability to find joy amidst adversity. Sophie bounded into the room, her hair a tousled mess, her eyes bright with excitement. "Mommy, are we going to the park today?" I smiled, my heart swelling with love. "Yes, sweetheart. We're going to have a great day." She clapped her hands, her laughter echoing through the room. "Yay! I love the park." As I watched her play, I realized that this was what mattered the most. The struggles, the pain, and the betrayal were behind us. What lay ahead was a path of healing and new adventures.
Hi, I'm Laura. If you peeked into my life, you'd probably find me buried in code, working remotely from my cozy little apartment. It's just me, my laptop, and the comforting hum of my routine. I'm not one for crowds or big social scenes. But Anna, my best and only friend since college, she's the complete opposite. She's this whirlwind of energy, always surrounded by friends, and happily married to Tom, who's as chatty and friendly as they come. Every time we meet, Anna has this thing about pushing me to date. "Laura, you're not getting any younger," she'd say in her half-joking, half-serious tone. "You need someone in your life other than your computer." I'd usually brush it off with a laugh, not really taking her seriously. But one evening, as we were lounging at her place, she was more persistent than usual. "I've got the perfect guy for you," she announced, her eyes lighting up with excitement. "His name's Chris, a family friend. You two would be great together." I remember twirling my spoon in my coffee, feeling a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "Blind dates aren't really my style, Anna. They're always so awkward," I protested. Anna leaned in, her smile persuasive. "It's not a blind date, silly. We'll have dinner here. Just the four of us. It'll be casual, no pressure." So, there I was, giving in to her plan. The night I met Chris at Anna's place, my stomach was a knot of nerves. But Chris, he was surprisingly easy to talk to. Kind of reserved, but with a genuine smile that made me feel more at ease. We all chatted in Anna's living room, the conversation flowing smoothly until Tom, out of the blue, brought up their struggles with fertility. "We're trying for a baby, but it's been hard," he said, and I could see the hope mixed with worry in his eyes. I nodded, feeling a bit out of my depth with such a personal topic. "I hope it works out for you guys," I said, and meant it. After that night, Chris and I started seeing each other. It wasn't like those dramatic love stories you read about. It was more comfortable. He was a good listener, and we shared a lot of the same interests. Before I even knew how it happened, we were dating. I remember thinking, as I fell asleep one night after one of our dates, that having someone else around isn't so bad. Not so bad at all. 6 months had flown by, and there I was, in a simple yet elegant white dress, saying, "I do" to Chris. It felt surreal, standing there with him, Anna intently watching us, her belly now showing a growing life inside. Tom was beaming, taking photos like a man on a mission. The first months of our marriage felt like living in a dream. Chris was everything I'd hoped for in a partner. Attentive, caring, always making me laugh with his subtle humor. We'd have these quiet evenings, just the two of us, and I cherished every moment. But as time passed, I noticed changes. Small at first, like Chris coming home late more often. "Work's been crazy," he'd say, kissing me on the forehead before heading to the shower. One evening, while Chris was working late again, I called Anna. "Hey, it's me. Chris has been really busy with work lately. Is this normal after getting married?" Anna's voice crackled through the phone. "Totally normal, Laura. Tom was like that too. Men in their work, you know?" I wanted to believe her, but something felt off. Chris was home less and less, and when he was, there was this distance, like he was there but not really with me. We stopped having those quiet evenings. It was like living with a ghost. One night when he came home late again, I couldn't hold it in anymore. "Chris, we need to talk. You've been so distant lately. Is everything okay?" He just shrugged, avoiding eye contact. "It's just work, Laura. You wouldn't understand. It's really busy right now." I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if this was what marriage was supposed to be like. The silence in the house felt heavy, suffocating. I missed our talks, our laughs, the way he used to look at me. The next morning, I called Anna, hoping for some reassurance. "Anna, I don't know what to do. It's like Chris is a different person." "Laura, give it time. He's just adjusting to married life. It's a phase. It'll pass," Anna said. But her words didn't comfort me like they used to. I hung up, feeling more alone than ever. Was this just a phase, or was I losing the man I married? The uncertainty was the hardest part, like walking in the dark, not knowing where the path was leading. The more Chris stayed out late, the more the silence in our house seemed to echo with unanswered questions. "Working late again," he'd say, his excuses sounding more and more like a rehearsed script. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, the unease growing inside me like a thorny vine. Desperate for some advice, I called Anna. I could hear the faint cries of her baby in the background. "Anna, I'm worried about Chris. He's always out late. It doesn't feel right," I said, my voice tinged with concern. Anna's response was quick, almost dismissive. "Oh, Laura, you're just being paranoid. I'm too busy with the baby to think about such things. Tom was the same when we first got married. It's normal," she said, the sound of her baby feeding interrupting our conversation. Her words did little to soothe me. If anything, they made me feel more alone, my concerns brushed off as mere paranoia. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. So, I decided to take a drastic step. Using my programming skills, I put together a small spyware program. I knew it was a violation of trust, but the need for truth overpowered my guilt. I installed it on Chris's phone, telling myself it was just to put my mind at ease. The first time I logged into the program, my heart pounded in my chest. The screen showed a map with Chris's location, a hotel in the city, nowhere near his office. As the days passed, the pattern became clear. Different hotels, always in the evenings. My stomach churned with each new revelation, but nothing prepared me for what I found next. The program allowed me to see his messages. I hesitated, knowing this was crossing a line, but I had to know. The chat window opened, and there it was, a stream of messages between Chris and someone else. Not just anyone, but Anna, my best friend. Their words were intimate, a stark contrast to the distant, almost formal way he spoke to me. I sat there, my whole body numb, as I read their plans, their laughter at my expense, the betrayal laid bare in pixels on my screen. The truth about my husband and my best friend, the two people I trusted most, was right in front of me, and it hit me with the force of a tidal wave. Chris married me in order to provide an alibi for himself. Now he can be near his mistress more often, hiding behind the fact that he is married to me. Unbelievable. We often don't see what's happening right under our noses, blinded by trust or maybe a refusal to acknowledge the possibility of betrayal. But there it was, in black and white. My world, as I knew it, had just crumbled. The nights became longer, each one stretching out like a dark, endless road as I sat alone, staring at my computer screen. The glow illuminated pages of messages between Chris and Anna, a window into a betrayal so deep it felt like drowning. Each message I read twisted the knife a little deeper. Chris's words about me were cruel and mocking. "Laura's so clueless. It's almost funny," he wrote in one message. And Anna, she laughed along, adding her own jabs. "Yeah, she's weirdly naive. It's like playing a game with a child." Their laughter at our expense wasn't the worst of it, though. They planned their secret rendezvous with a casualness that made my stomach churn. "How about the Hilton this Thursday?" Chris would suggest. "Perfect, can't wait," Anna would reply, as if they were planning a simple coffee meeting. But one message stopped me cold, a revelation that felt like a physical blow. It was Anna talking about her newborn, Tom's supposed child. "The best part is Tom thinks he's the father," she wrote with a twisted pride. Chris's reply was a heartless confirmation. "Our little secret. He's none the wiser." It wasn't just an affair. It was a double betrayal, the depth of which was unimaginable. The evidence of their deceit wasn't just in the messages on my screen. It was lying in a crib, gurgling and cooing, oblivious to the web of lies surrounding its existence. I sat there, numb, the reality sinking in. My husband, the man I had vowed to spend my life with, was not only unfaithful, but a father to my best friend's child. And Anna, the friend I had trusted with my deepest fears and happiest moments, was a willing participant in this cruel game. As the night wore on, the silence of the house enveloped me. It was no longer a home, but a stage for a tragedy I never saw coming. The betrayal was not just of the heart. It was a betrayal of every moment we had shared, every laugh, every secret. And at the center of it all was a child, an innocent life caught in the crossfire of selfish desires. I realized then that the most profound wounds are often inflicted by those closest to us. And the evidence of this betrayal was now lying innocently in a crib, a living reminder of the lies and deceit that had shattered my world. The morning after I discovered the truth about Chris and Anna, I felt like I was in a daze. My apartment, once a haven, now felt like a cage trapping me with my betrayal. I knew what I had to do. Tom deserved to know the truth as much as I did. I picked up my phone, my heart pounding. Dialing Tom's number felt like stepping off a cliff. "Tom, it's Laura. We need to talk. It's about Anna and Chris." Tom's usually cheerful voice was laced with concern. "Laura, what's going on? You sound serious." I took a deep breath, my voice shaky. "It's bad, Tom. Can we meet somewhere private? There's something you need to see." We met at a quiet cafe, away from the places where our lives had crossed. Tom looked anxious as he sat down. "Okay, Laura, what's this all about? You're scaring me." I pushed the printouts of the messages across the table to him. "Tom, I'm sorry to drop this on you, but Chris and Anna, they've been having an affair." Tom's face went pale as he read the messages. His usual jovial demeanor vanished, replaced by a mix of anger and disbelief. This is bullshit. Anna wouldn't..." "And Chris?" His voice was a mix of rage and pain. "There's more," I said, the words feeling like lead in my mouth. "The baby. Chris might be the father." Tom looked like he had been slapped. He slammed his hand on the table, drawing stares. "That son of a... How could they do this? My own wife? My baby?" I could see the hurt in his eyes, raw and unfiltered. "I'm so sorry, Tom. I thought you should know. You deserved the truth." Tom ran his hands through his hair, a gesture of frustration and disbelief. "I can't believe I've been such a fool. We need to do something, Laura. We can't let them get away with this." His words echoed my own thoughts. I agree. We need a plan. They've been playing us for fools, and it's time they faced the consequences. As we talked, our plan began to take shape. It wasn't just about confronting them. It was about exposing their lies, making them feel a fraction of the pain they'd caused us. We left the cafe with a sense of purpose, a bond formed through shared betrayal. As I drove home, the reality of what I was about to do settled in. This wasn't just about confronting a cheating spouse. It was about revenge. And my revenge would be cold, much colder than an iceberg. The day of the confrontation felt like walking into a storm. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears as I drove to Anna's house with Chris. He was clueless, humming along to the radio, while my hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. We walked into Anna's house, where Tom was already waiting. His face was a mask of calm, but his eyes were like flint. Anna greeted us, all smiles, unaware of the storm about to break. "Hey, everyone. So glad you could make it," Anna chirped, her voice grating on my nerves. Tom cut right to the chase. "I have something to share. A surprise." Anna's smile faltered. "A surprise? What kind of surprise?" Tom pulled out an envelope. "It's a DNA test. It says, 'I'm not the father of your baby, Anna.'" Anna's face drained of color. "What? Tom, why would you? That's ridiculous." Chris turned to me, confusion written all over his face. "Laura, what's going on?" I looked him straight in the eye, my voice steady. "Why don't you tell us, Chris, about you and Anna?" Anna's eyes darted between me and Tom, panic rising. "Laura, I don't know what you're talking about." Tom slammed his hand on the table, his voice rising. "Cut the crap, Anna. We know about the affair. We have the proof." Chris's face went from confused to pale. "Laura, it's not what you think." I threw the printouts of their messages on the table. "It's exactly what I think. How long, Chris? How long have you been lying to me?" Anna started to cry, her sobs dramatic. "It was a mistake. I'm so sorry." Tom's voice was like ice. "Sorry doesn't cut it, Anna. You've ruined everything." The room was thick with tension, a tangle of lies and betrayal finally laid bare. Chris tried to reach out to me, but I pulled away. "Don't touch me. You've betrayed me in the worst way." Anna was pleading now, looking at Tom. "Please, Tom. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." But Tom was unmoved. "Meaning doesn't change facts, Anna. It's over." I looked at Chris, my voice cold. "We're done, Chris. I want a divorce." The confrontation was brutal, the air heavy with the weight of broken trust and shattered relationships. As I walked out of Anna's house, I knew there was no going back. The truth had been revealed, and with it, the end of the life I thought I knew. After the confrontation, the drive home was a blur. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions: anger, betrayal, sadness. It wasn't just the affair, it was the depth of the deceit that cut the deepest. The next day, I called Chris, needing to hear him say it. "Chris, we need to talk. You owe me that much." He agreed to meet, his voice resigned. We sat across from each other at our kitchen table, a battlefield of broken vows. "Start talking, Chris. I want to hear you say it," I demanded, my voice steady despite the chaos inside me. Chris looked down, unable to meet my eyes. "It started as just a fling. I didn't mean for it to go this far." "A fling? You call destroying our marriage a fling?" My voice rose, tinged with anger and hurt. "I'm sorry, Laura. I never meant to hurt you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Sorry doesn't undo the lies, Chris. It doesn't change anything," I snapped back. There was a pause, heavy with unsaid words. "What are you going to do?" he finally asked. "I want a divorce. and I'll be talking to a lawyer about compensation for this betrayal, I said, my resolve firm. Chris nodded, defeated. I understand. I'll cooperate. The conversation with Anna was even harder. I called her, my former best friend, now the source of my deepest pain. Anna, we need to talk, I said as soon as she picked up. Laura, I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. Anna's voice was shaky, filled with false remorse. Save it, Anna. How could you do this to me? To Tom? To your own family? I asked, my voice hard. I was selfish. I made a terrible mistake, she admitted. A mistake? You made a choice, Anna. And now you have to live with the consequences, I replied coldly. I know, and I'll do whatever it takes to make it right, she said, but her words felt empty. It's too late for that. Tom knows everything. You've lost him and you've lost me, I said, hanging up before she could respond. The aftermath was messy. Lawyers were involved, divorce papers were filed, and settlements discussed. But through it all, I held my head high. I was hurt, yes, but not broken. I realized that sometimes the hardest betrayals come from those we trust the most. But they also teach us the most valuable lessons about strength and self-respect. As the chapter of my life with Chris and Anna closed, I knew that I was walking away with something invaluable, my dignity and the knowledge that I was stronger than I ever knew. The day I signed the final divorce papers, it felt like I was signing off on the most painful chapter of my life. In the lawyer's office, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey. You're doing great, Laura. Most wouldn't have handled it as well as you have, my lawyer said, offering a sympathetic smile as he handed me the documents. Yeah, well, when life kicks you down, you kick back harder, I replied, trying to sound tougher than I felt. Leaving the office, the reality of my new life hit me. I was no longer part of a we, but just me, Laura, on my own. It was scary, but also a chance for a fresh start. I met with Tom a few days later. We were like comrades who had survived the same war. How's life treating you, Tom? I asked as we grabbed coffee. Tom sighed, stirring his cup. It's rough, Laura. Every day's a challenge. But like you said, we kick back harder, right? Right. We rebuild, stronger and wiser, I said, feeling a sense of solidarity. We chatted more about moving forward, about not letting our past define us. It was a conversation tinged with sadness, but also hope. Driving home, I thought about Chris and Anna. Last I heard, they were together, but far from happy. Anna, used to a life of luxury, was now stuck in a cramped apartment, constantly at Chris's throat for the financial mess they were in. A neighbor told me how they were always fighting, their arguments loud enough for the whole block to hear. Police were there just last week, she had said, shaking her head in disapproval. It was ironic. They had betrayed us, thinking they'd find happiness with each other, but all they found was misery. Every scandal, every shout I imagined between them was a reminder that karma does its job. As I entered my apartment, the quiet was a balm to my soul. I was alone, yes, but at peace. I had weathered a storm I never saw coming and came out stronger. I gazed out of my window, the world outside oblivious to my struggles and triumphs. Here's to new beginnings, I whispered to myself, a small but determined smile on my lips. I turned from the window, feeling a sense of empowerment. The future was uncertain, but it was mine to shape. I had survived, I had learned, and now it was time to live.
My name is Karen. 4 years ago, I stepped into a life I thought was perfect. Married at 27 to Michael, a man who promised to carry me in his arms before we even walked down the aisle, I felt like the luckiest woman alive. He wasn't just my husband, he was my best friend, my confidant. We shared everything, from morning coffees to late-night dreams about our future. Michael always had a way of making me feel special. I remember our first anniversary. He recreated our first date, down to the same table at the quaint Italian restaurant where we first realized we were meant for each other. It wasn't just about the grand gestures, it was the little things. The way he'd brush the hair from my face, the soft kisses he'd plant on my forehead when he thought I was asleep. Our life together was bliss, filled with laughter and love. We lived in a beautiful house, spacious and filled with light. It was our haven, a place where we planned to raise a family. My job as a fitness trainer at a popular gym brought me joy and fulfillment, and Michael was thriving in his career. We were doing well financially, and we often talked about starting a family, about having kids running around the house, filling it with even more laughter and joy. Evelyn, Michael's mother, was a strong presence in our lives. From the first time I met her, she showered me with compliments. "You're absolutely stunning, Karen, just like a Hollywood actress from the 50s, she'd said, her eyes sparkling with genuine fondness. She often spoke about how beautiful our children would be, combining my looks with Michael's charm. Her approval meant the world to me. But then, one ordinary evening, everything changed. I was driving home from the gym, my mind buzzing with plans for the weekend. Michael and I had planned a small getaway, just the two of us, a chance to reconnect and talk more about our future, about finally starting that family we'd always wanted. As I approached the intersection, a song we both loved started playing on the radio. I smiled, turning up the volume, lost in the moment. That's when it happened. Out of nowhere, a car ran the red light and slammed into my side. The impact was deafening, a cacophony of crunching metal and shattering glass. My head whipped to the side, and pain erupted across my face and body. The world spun wildly, a blur of lights and sounds, and then, as quickly as it had all started, everything plunged into silence and darkness. Waking up in the hospital was like emerging into a world I no longer recognized. My body was a patchwork of aches and bandages. The first few days were a blur of doctors, painkillers, and Michael's face, etched with worry. Michael sat beside me, holding my hand. His voice was gentle, but his eyes couldn't hide his concern. "Hey, how are you feeling?" he asked. I tried to smile, but it hurt. "Like I've been hit by a truck," I joked weakly. He offered a strained smile, but said nothing. The nurses were kind, always checking in, offering comforting words. But their eyes, full of pity, told a story they didn't voice. I knew I was badly hurt, but the extent of it was hidden beneath the bandages that wrapped my face. As days turned into a week, Michael's visits grew shorter, his excuses more frequent. "Work's crazy right now," he'd say, or "Mom needs my help with something." I understood, or at least I tried to, but the silence and the solitude in the hospital room were suffocating. The day came to remove the bandages. I sat in front of a mirror, my heart racing. The nurse, a kind woman named Lisa, offered me an encouraging smile. "Ready?" she asked. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Slowly, she unwrapped the bandages, revealing my reflection bit by bit. The face staring back at me was a stranger's, scarred, distorted, a stark contrast to the woman I used to be. I couldn't hold back the tears. Lisa put a comforting hand on my shoulder. "It's still early days. Healing takes time," she said softly. I barely heard her. My thoughts were consumed by fear. What would Michael think? What would everyone think? I was no longer the woman he married. Michael's next visit was the hardest. He walked in, his usual confident stride faltering as he saw my face. "Hey," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I looked away, unable to meet his eyes. "It's bad, isn't it?" I asked, my voice trembling. Michael paused, struggling to find the right words. It's not that bad. You're still you." But the way he said it, the way he couldn't quite look at me, spoke volumes. I lay there, feeling a chasm growing between us. The man who had promised to carry me through life seemed lost, unsure of how to bridge the gap that my scars had created. He came out of the hospital room, and I overheard him on the phone. His words, meant to be private, cut through me like a knife. "I don't know, Mom. She became ugly. It's hard to look at her," he said, and there was something like disgust in his voice. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, tears streaming down my face. I felt betrayed, not by his words, but by the realization that his love had conditions I was no longer able to meet. I mourned for my lost beauty, for the love I thought was unconditional, and for the future that now seemed like a distant dream. Returning home was supposed to be a relief, a step towards normalcy. But as I crossed the threshold of the house that once symbolized love and warmth, I felt sick because of the suffocating atmosphere of hostility, hidden hints, and disgust. The first few days, Michael was quiet, almost tiptoeing around me. Our conversations were strained, filled with awkward silences. I tried to bridge the gap, to reach out to him, but it felt like talking to a wall. One evening, as I sat on the couch trying to read, Michael walked in. He glanced at me, then quickly looked away. "How was your day?" I asked, hoping to start some kind of conversation. He shrugged, keeping his eyes fixed on the TV. "It was okay. Busy." I nodded, feeling a knot in my stomach. "I was thinking, maybe this weekend we could go out, just to get some fresh air." Michael hesitated, then said, "I don't think it's a good idea. Maybe you should rest more." His words stung. It wasn't about resting. It was about not wanting to be seen with me. I turned my attention back to my book, but the words blurred through my tears. It wasn't just Michael. Evelyn's visits were even more difficult. She would come in, her face twisted in a poorly disguised grimace as she looked at me. Her words were polite, but her eyes were cold. One day, she sat across from me, her gaze wandering everywhere but my face. "It's such a shame what happened," she said, a tinge of something like disgust in her voice. I clenched my fists, trying to maintain my composure. "Yes, it is," I replied, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Evelyn sighed, tapping her fingers on the table. "Well, we must all move on, right? Life doesn't stop." Her words, meant to be comforting, felt more like an attempt to avoid a difficult conversation. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Then came the night that broke me. I woke up to the sound of Michael's voice. He was on the phone, his words slurred. Curiosity got the better of me, and I crept closer to the door. "I can't do this anymore, Mom. She's a different person, a monster. I don't even recognize her," he slurred, his voice heavy with drink. I stood there, frozen, as his words echoed in my head. I was the same person, wasn't I? But to him, I was a stranger, a monster, someone he no longer loved or desired. I returned to bed, but sleep eluded me. The darkness of the room felt suffocating, a physical embodiment of the loneliness that had enveloped my life. Lying there, I realized that the home I once cherished no longer existed. It was just a house now, a place where I lived but no longer belonged. The changes in our home were like a slow, creeping fog, gradually obscuring the warmth and love that once filled it. Michael began coming home late, the smell of alcohol clinging to him like a second skin. His eyes, once so full of affection, now often glinted with irritation and something darker. One night, he staggered in, his steps unsteady. I sat up, concerned. "Michael, you're home late. Is everything okay?" He sneered, his words slurred. "Oh, now you care? You spend all day hiding in this house, and now you pretend to care about me?" I flinched, stung by his words. "Michael, you're drunk. Let's talk about this in the morning." He laughed bitterly, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. "What's there to talk about? Look at you. Look at us." I retreated to our room, tears stinging my eyes. The next day, I called Evelyn, hoping for some understanding, some support. "He's drinking a lot, coming home late, and he's mean," I told her, my voice breaking. Evelyn's response was curt, dismissive. "It's normal, dear. Men do these things. He's just stressed, that's all." Her words were like a cold splash of water. I realized then that I was alone in this, that my pain and my struggles were mine to bear. The worst night came without warning. I woke up to bright flashes of light. Blinking away sleep, I saw Michael standing over me with his phone, taking pictures. His face was twisted in a drunken smirk. "What are you doing?" I asked, confusion and fear mingling in my voice. He laughed, a cruel, harsh sound. "I'm sending your photos to Hollywood. Maybe you can star in horror films now, no makeup needed." His words cut through me like a knife. I lay there, frozen, as he continued to snap pictures, each click of the camera shutter a punctuation mark to my humiliation. After he left, I turned my face into the pillow, my body racked with sobs. The tears came in torrents, for the man I had lost, for the love that had turned to cruelty, and for the life that seemed to be slipping through my fingers. Humiliated by Michael's cruel remarks and feeling increasingly alienated, I started wearing a mask at home. It was a plain, white mask, hiding the scars that had become the focus of my existence. It was a small shield against the pain, a barrier between me and the world that had turned so cold. As I adjusted the mask one morning, looking at the blank face staring back at me in the mirror, my phone rang, cutting through the silence of the room. An unknown number flashed on the screen, and with a hesitant hand, I answered. "Hello, is this Mrs. Johnson?" The voice was unfamiliar, cautious yet sincere. "Yes, it's me. Who's this?" I replied, curiosity piqued. "My name is John. I was the father of the young man in your accident," he said, his voice laced with regret. A mix of emotions washed over me. "Oh, I see," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. John paused before continuing. "I can't express how sorry I am for what happened. My son was troubled, and what he did, it was unforgivable. I want to do something to help, to make amends." His words, unexpected and heavy with sorrow, left me momentarily speechless. "How can you help?" I asked, skepticism mingling with a faint spark of hope. "I'd like to meet and discuss it in person. Would that be okay?" John's request was earnest, almost pleading. After a moment of hesitation, I agreed to meet him. Sitting across from John in a cafe, his eyes filled with remorse, I listened as he spoke. "Karen, I want to offer financial support for any surgeries or treatments that might help you," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. The offer was both overwhelming and tempting. I need to think about it," I replied, my mind racing with possibilities. I kept the meeting and the offer a secret from Michael and Evelyn. Their reactions, I feared, would only add to my confusion and pain. After days of internal debate, I decided to accept John's offer. I arranged consultations with plastic surgeons, discussing what could be done to help heal my scars. To Michael, I mentioned only that I was going for routine medical treatments. He didn't ask for details, and I didn't volunteer any, his indifference a stark contrast to the storm of emotions raging inside me. On the day of the surgery, as I lay on the operating table, the mask was removed, and for a moment I faced my scars unflinchingly. Closing my eyes, I allowed myself to dream, to hope for a future where the woman in the mirror would be someone I recognized, someone whole. Weeks turned into months since the surgery, and with each passing day, my face healed, slowly returning to what it once was. But I kept this transformation hidden under my mask, a secret held close to my chest. Michael, lost in his own world, didn't seem to notice or care. The day I returned home from my final follow-up appointment, the mask firmly in place, I braced myself. Michael and Evelyn were there, their expressions clouded with disdain as I walked in. The air was thick with unspoken contempt, a familiar yet unwelcome presence in what used to be our home. Michael's eyes met mine briefly before he looked away, his lips curling into a sneer. "Look at you, hiding behind that mask. Can't even face the world," he muttered. I remained silent, the mask my armor against his words. Without warning, he thrust a stack of papers towards me. They fluttered to the ground, divorce papers, a stark symbol of our failed marriage. "I'm done with this farce," he spat out. "Sign these and let's end it." I felt a cold calm settle over me. Picking up the papers, I signed them without a word, my pen steady, my resolve firmer than ever. Evelyn, standing nearby, scoffed. "Good riddance. We don't need an ugly reminder of your failure in our lives." Her words, meant to wound, barely grazed me. I had grown beyond their reach. With a small smile playing on my lips, I reached up and removed my mask, revealing my face, almost as it was before the accident. The shock on Michael's and Evelyn's faces was a picture I'd remember forever. Michael's eyes widened, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Evelyn's hand flew to her mouth, her earlier poise crumbling. But how? Michael stammered, taking a step towards me. I looked at him, my smile growing. You were too busy wallowing in your own misery to notice me, to see the person you vowed to love in sickness and in health. Michael's face crumbled, his earlier bravado fading. Please, let's start over. We can forget all this happened. I laughed, not out of joy, but because of the absurdity of his words. Forget? No, Michael. I won't forget how you treated me, how you made me feel. I'm leaving, but not because you or your mother want me to. I'm leaving for me. I gathered my bag, my signed divorce papers in hand, and walked past them, out of the house that was no longer a home. Their shocked faces were the last image I took with me, a reminder of how far I had come and the new life that awaited me. Starting over wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I moved into a small apartment, a space that was mine alone. It was here, among unpacked boxes and bare walls, that I began to rebuild my life. Returning to work at the fitness center was a big step. The familiar smell of the gym, the sound of weights clinking. It was comforting. My colleagues welcomed me back with open arms, their smiles genuine and warm. Hey Karen, you're back. We missed you around here, said Lisa, one of the trainers. I smiled, feeling a sense of belonging. It's good to be back. I've missed this place. As I resumed training sessions, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. With each class I taught, I grew stronger, not just physically, but emotionally too. I was finding myself again, rediscovering the woman who loved her job, who took pride in her strength. One day, after a particularly grueling session, I sat down on a bench, catching my breath. That's when John walked in. I hadn't seen him since our meeting at the cafe months ago. Hello, he said, a tentative smile on his face. I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by. How are you? I stood up, surprised but pleased to see him. I'm doing well, thank you. It's good to see you, John. We talked for a while, about mundane things at first, the weather, the gym. Then, the conversation shifted to more personal topics. I never got the chance to thank you properly, I said, my voice sincere. Your help. It changed everything for me. John's smile was warm. I'm just glad I could do something to make amends. You've come a long way. He hesitated for a moment before continuing. I was wondering if maybe you'd like to grab a coffee sometime? No pressure, just as friends. The invitation caught me off guard, but it was a pleasant surprise. I'd like that, I replied, a genuine smile spreading across my face. As I watched him leave the gym, I felt a flutter of excitement, a feeling I hadn't experienced in a long time. It was the beginning of something new, a chance to explore life from a fresh perspective. That night, as I lay in bed in my new apartment, I thought about the twists and turns my life had taken. There was still pain and healing ahead, but there was also hope. Hope for a future that was mine to shape. The dawn of a new day was breaking, and I was ready to meet it head on. The journey of life, I've come to realize, is never a straight path. It twists and turns, bringing challenges and surprises along the way. Since my divorce, I've been rediscovering who I am, but not without unexpected obstacles. Michael, unable to accept the end of our marriage, began reaching out, trying to rekindle what we once had. His persistence, a stark contrast to his earlier indifference, forced me to seek legal means to ensure my peace. It was a difficult decision, but necessary for my well-being. The day I stood in court, asking for a restraining order, I felt a mix of sadness and determination. Sadness for what our relationship had become, and determination to protect my newfound independence. Meanwhile, my relationship with John was blossoming into something beautiful and profound. He was a constant source of support and understanding. On one of our dates, as we walked along a riverbank under the stars, he turned to me and said something that stayed with me. You know, you were always beautiful, even with your scars. It's just that not everyone can look past the surface. Not everyone can see into the soul. I looked at him, touched by his words. "Thank you, John. That means more to me than you can imagine." He smiled, his eyes reflecting the starlight. "It's the truth, and I'm grateful for every part of you." That night, as I lay in bed, reflecting on everything that had happened, I felt a deep sense of contentment. My journey had been fraught with pain and heartache, but it had also led me to a place of self-acceptance and love. I realized then that the most profound form of love isn't about how we look or what we have. It's about being loved for our soul, for the essence of who we are. John saw me for me, scars and all, and cherished what he saw. Life had come full circle, but in a way I hadn't anticipated. I had lost a life I thought was perfect, only to find a deeper, more meaningful existence. I had learned to love myself and found someone who loved me for the person I had become. As I drifted off to sleep, I felt a sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the lessons learned, for the strength gained, and for the love that had found its way into my life. I had emerged from the shadows of my past, stepping into a future bright with promise and hope. My name is Olivia. I'm a 30-year-old woman who loves numbers and planning. I have a good job and a stable life. People always said I was good with numbers. This skill has helped me a lot in life. But everything changed when I met Michael. I first saw Michael at a party. I don't usually go to parties, but my friend Sarah convinced me. "Come on, Olivia, you need to get out more," she had said. At the party, I was standing alone, holding a drink, when Michael walked up to me. He was tall and had a smile that made people feel at ease. "Hi, I'm Michael. I don't think we've met," he said, extending his hand. I shook his hand. "I'm Olivia." "So, Olivia, what brings you here?" he asked. I shrugged. "My friend dragged me here. I'm not much of a party person." "Neither am I," Michael laughed. "But sometimes it's good to get out of your comfort zone." We talked for a while. Michael was easy to talk to. He listened to me and made me laugh. He told me about his job at a local bookstore and his love for old movies. I told him about my job as an accountant and my love for puzzles. As the night went on, we found ourselves sitting away from the crowd, lost in our conversation. It was strange. We were so different, yet we connected so easily. When the party ended, Michael asked for my number. "I'd like to see you again, Olivia. Maybe we can go for coffee?" I hesitated, but then nodded. "Sure, that would be nice." We started seeing each other after that night. We went on dates, watched movies, and talked for hours. Michael was charming and kind. He made me feel special. But there was one thing that bothered me. Michael didn't plan much. He lived in the moment, which was the opposite of me. I loved to plan everything. It made me feel in control. One day, I brought this up. "Michael, don't you think you should plan more? It's important to have a plan." Michael just smiled. "Olivia, I like the way I live. Planning is good, but sometimes you have to just go with the flow." I didn't understand it, but I liked him too much to argue. Months passed, and our relationship grew stronger. One evening, Michael took me to a quiet spot by the river. It was a beautiful night. The stars were out, and the air was fresh. "Olivia," Michael said, turning to me, "I love you. I know we're different, but I think that's what makes us special. Will you marry me?" I was shocked. Marriage was a big step, but looking into Michael's eyes, I saw sincerity and love. "Yes, Michael, I'll marry you," I said. And that's how my life took a turn. I, Olivia, the woman who loved numbers and planning, was going to marry Michael, the charming, easygoing man who lived in the moment. It was unexpected, but sometimes life is like that. It surprises you when you least expect it. When Michael and I decided to get married, I imagined a small wedding, just close family and friends, a simple ceremony, and maybe a dinner afterward. But things didn't go as I had imagined. We met each other's parents to share the news. My parents liked Michael right away. "He's a simple, honest man," my dad said, shaking Michael's hand. Michael's parents, on the other hand, seemed relieved. "It's good you found someone serious," his mom, Margaret, said with a sigh. As we started planning the wedding, Michael and I sat down with our parents. "I was thinking of a small wedding," I began, looking at Michael for support. He nodded in agreement, but Margaret had other ideas. "Oh no, dear. Michael is our only son. We must have a big wedding. All our friends and family should come. It needs to be grand. I tried to protest. But Margaret, that's not what we want. Michael, however, didn't support me. Mom knows best, Olivia. Let's do what she wants. So the wedding planning began. It was nothing like what I had wanted. The guest list kept growing. Strangers I had never met were invited. The venue was huge, the decorations were extravagant, and everything was over the top. One day, while tasting cakes, I tried to talk to Michael. This is too much, Michael. This isn't what we wanted. But Michael just shrugged. It's just one day, Olivia. Let's make everyone happy. The wedding day arrived. I stood in a dressing room, wearing a dress that was too big and too fancy. Sarah was there, trying to cheer me up. You look beautiful, Olivia. I forced a smile. Thanks, Sarah. I just wish this was different. As I walked down the aisle, I saw so many faces, most of which I didn't recognize. The ceremony was a blur. I said, I do, but my heart was heavy. The reception was even worse. Loud music, too many people, and Margaret hovering around, making sure everything was as she wanted. At one point, I stepped outside for some air. Michael found me. Hey, are you okay? He asked. I looked at him, feeling a mix of emotions. This isn't what I wanted, Michael. This isn't us. Michael took my hand. I know, Olivia, but it's just one day. We have our whole lives ahead of us. I wanted to believe him, but standing there, surrounded by a celebration that felt more like an ordeal, I couldn't help but wonder if I had made a mistake. I loved Michael, but our wedding, something that was supposed to be about us, had turned into something unrecognizable, and that worried me. The days after the wedding were supposed to be happy, but they weren't. Michael and I settled into our new life, but something had changed. And then, Margaret came into the picture in a way I hadn't expected. It was a Tuesday morning. I was getting ready for work when the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find Margaret standing there with a suitcase. Margaret, what a surprise. Is everything okay? I asked, confused. Oh dear, I thought Michael told you. I'm staying with you for a while. My house is being renovated, she said, pushing past me. I was stunned. Michael hadn't mentioned anything. I called him at work. Michael, why didn't you tell me your mom was staying with us? Oh, I forgot. It's just for a few weeks, Olivia. It's not a big deal, he said casually. But it was a big deal. Margaret didn't just stay with us. She took over our lives. She had opinions on everything, what we ate, how we cleaned, and especially how we spent our money. One evening, I came home to find Margaret sitting at the kitchen table with our bills spread out in front of her. What are you doing, Margaret? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. I'm looking at your expenses. You're spending too much. As a family, we need to save, she said, not looking up. I was shocked. Margaret, these are our personal finances. It's not your place. Margaret finally looked at me. As your mother-in-law and an elder, it is my place. I'm just trying to help. I wanted to argue, but I knew it wouldn't help. I walked away, feeling frustrated and invaded. The situation got worse. Margaret criticized everything I did. One Saturday, I was making breakfast when she walked into the kitchen. You're making pancakes? That's too many carbs. You should make something healthier, she said, frowning. I took a deep breath. Margaret, I appreciate your concern, but I can make my own decisions about what I eat. She tutted. I'm just saying, a wife should take care of her health. I felt my anger rising, but before I could say anything, Michael walked in. What's going on? He asked. Your mother is telling me how to cook now, I said, my voice shaking with anger. Michael looked uncomfortable. Mom, maybe you should let Olivia do her thing. Margaret rolled her eyes. Fine, but don't blame me if things go wrong. That night, I tried to talk to Michael. I can't live like this. Your mother is controlling everything. Michael sighed. She's just trying to help Olivia. She's old and set in her ways. But this is our home, Michael. We should make our own decisions, I argued. Michael didn't say anything. He just went to bed, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I had reached my limit with Margaret's constant meddling and criticism, especially regarding our finances. It was time to take a stand. One evening, as we all sat in the living room, I decided to bring up the subject. Margaret, I've been thinking, I began, trying to keep my tone neutral. How about we do an experiment? For 1 month, let's keep separate budgets for our expenses. Then we can compare and see who's more efficient with money. Margaret raised an eyebrow. An experiment? Interesting. You think you can manage better than me? I nodded. Yes, I do. Michael looked uneasy. Olivia, is this necessary? Yes, Michael, it is. I think it's a fair challenge, I said firmly. Margaret smiled, almost smugly. All right, dear. Challenge accepted. So, the battle of budgets began. I kept meticulous records of every penny I spent, making sure to be as efficient as possible. Meanwhile, I noticed Michael sneaking extra cash from the joint account, but I didn't say anything. The month flew by, and soon it was time to compare our expenses. We sat down at the dining table, each with our records. Let's see what you've got, Olivia, Margaret said, a confident smile on her face. I laid out my documents, showing every transaction and bill. As you can see, I've managed to save quite a bit this month, even with all the regular expenses. Margaret looked over the papers, her smile fading slightly. Not bad, but let's see what Michael has. Michael cleared his throat. Well, I didn't spend much, just the usual stuff. I decided it was time to reveal what I knew. Michael, what about the extra money you took from our joint account? Michael's face turned red. I needed it for some personal things. I pulled out the bank statements from the joint account. Here's the proof. Your spending was higher than mine this month. Margaret's face was a mix of surprise and anger. Michael, you lied? Why? Michael didn't have an answer. He just looked down, embarrassed. I turned to Margaret. As you can see, I'm quite capable of managing our finances efficiently. Margaret was silent for a moment. Then she looked up, her expression hard. Fine, you've made your point. But this doesn't change anything. I still believe I know what's best for this family. I let out a sigh. It was a small victory, but I knew the battle was far from over. Margaret's control over our lives was still a problem, and Michael's lack of support was even more concerning. But at least I had proven my point. I was good with numbers, and I knew how to manage money. It was a start, but I knew there were more challenges ahead. The air was tense after the budget challenge. Margaret's attitude towards me hadn't improved, and Michael was still avoiding any confrontation. I knew something had to give, and soon it did, but not in the way I expected. It was a Saturday morning, and I was in the kitchen making coffee when Margaret walked in, her expression stern. Olivia, we need to talk, she said, her voice sharp. I turned to face her. Okay, Margaret, what's on your mind? It's about your attitude towards money. You're too controlling, too greedy. It's not healthy, she accused. I was taken aback. Greedy? Margaret, I'm just trying to be responsible with our finances. Margaret shook her head. No, you're hoarding. You don't want to share. You don't understand what it means to be part of a family. I felt my frustration rising. That's not true. I work hard for my money, and I think it's fair to want to manage it wisely. Before I could say more, Michael walked in. What's going on? Your wife, Margaret said, turning to him. She's too obsessed with money. It's not right. Michael looked at me, then at his mother. Olivia, maybe you should ease up a bit. Mom has a point. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Michael, you're taking her side? After all the evidence I showed you? Michael shrugged. I just think we should all get along. That was the last straw. I stormed out of the kitchen and went to our home office. I pulled out the documents I had been keeping, proof of all the money Michael had been giving to Margaret without my knowledge. I gathered everything and went back to the kitchen. Okay, you want to talk about money? Let's talk, I said, my voice steady but firm. I laid out the documents on the table. Bank statements, receipts, everything. Here's proof of all the money Michael has been giving you, Margaret, most of it from my earnings. Margaret's face turned red. That's none of your business. He's my son, and he's helping his mother. I looked at Michael. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Michael looked away. I just wanted to help her. I turned back to Margaret. And what about the wedding? You wanted a grand affair. Who do you think paid for that? It was me, against my wishes." Margaret was silent, her mouth a tight line. I took a deep breath. I've had enough. This is not how a family should be. I work hard for my money, and I won't be accused of being greedy or controlling for wanting to manage it responsibly. Margaret looked at me, her eyes cold. "So what are you going to do?" I met her gaze. "I'm going to think about what's best for me. This can't go on." With that, I left the room. I felt a mix of anger, frustration, and sadness. My marriage was crumbling, and the family I had hoped to be part of was nothing like I had imagined. It was time to make some tough decisions. But for the moment, I just needed some space to think and to breathe. The house felt colder. The walls seemed to echo my thoughts. I spent the next few days mostly in silence, contemplating my next steps. I knew a conversation with Michael was inevitable, and it came sooner than I expected. It was a quiet evening. Michael walked into the living room where I was sitting, a determined look on his face. "We need to talk, Olivia," he said. I nodded. "Yes, we do." He took a deep breath. "I've been thinking, and I've made a decision." I waited, my heart pounding. I want things to go back to how they were. I want to spend my money how I like. "I don't want to argue about it anymore," he said. I looked at him, trying to keep my emotions in check. "Michael, it's not just about the money. It's about respect, trust, and partnership. We're supposed to be in this together." He shook his head. "I can't live like this, constantly being questioned and judged. So, I'm giving you an ultimatum. Let me spend without restraint, or we get a divorce." His words hit me like a punch. I felt a mix of disbelief and clarity. "You're giving me an ultimatum?" "Yes," he said firmly. I took a moment to gather my thoughts. "Okay, Michael. If that's how you see our marriage, then I agree to the divorce." He seemed taken aback. "You agree? Just like that?" I stood up, feeling a sense of resolve. "Yes, just like that. I won't be part of a marriage where my partner doesn't respect me or our future together. I deserve better." For the first time, I saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes. "Olivia, are you sure?" I nodded. "Yes, I'm sure. I want a partner who stands with me, not against me. And clearly, that's not you." Michael didn't say anything more. He just turned and left the room. I sat back down, feeling a strange mix of sadness and relief. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was taking control of my life. The ultimatum was meant to corner me, but instead, it had set me free. The house felt different after Michael left, quiet, empty, but it was a space I was ready to reclaim. I began by reorganizing, rearranging furniture, and redecorating. It was therapeutic, a way of wiping the slate clean. One evening, while sorting through old photographs, my phone rang. It was Sarah, a dear friend I hadn't seen in months. "Olivia, how are you holding up?" Sarah's voice was warm, laced with concern. "I'm managing, Sarah. Just taking it one day at a time," I replied. "I can't believe Michael did that. And his mom?" "I never trusted her," Sarah added. I let out a soft laugh. "You and me both. But it's over now. I'm focusing on what's ahead." "You're so strong, Olivia. Hey, why don't we catch up soon? It's been too long," Sarah suggested. "That sounds perfect. Let's do it." I agreed, feeling a flicker of excitement. We met the next evening at a cozy cafe, a place brimming with memories. Sarah's presence was comforting, a reminder of life beyond my recent troubles. "Olivia, I'm so proud of you. You're handling this like a champ," Sarah said as we sipped our coffee. I shrugged modestly. "I don't have a choice, Sarah. I refuse to let this break me." "You're amazing. Remember, I'm always here if you need anything," she said, squeezing my hand across the table. I smiled genuinely. "Thank you, Sarah. That means the world to me." Life gradually regained its rhythm. I reconnected with friends, found solace in quiet evenings with books, and poured myself into my work. I was rediscovering myself, piece by piece. Then one day, out of the blue, my phone rang. It was Michael. "Olivia, I want to apologize. Can we talk?" His voice was unsteady. I hesitated, but answered, "Go ahead, Michael." I was wrong, terribly wrong. Living with my mom, it's impossible. She's never satisfied, and I can't keep up with her demands. I don't have enough money. I need to come back home, Olivia, he pleaded. I took a deep breath, steadying my voice. Michael, I accepted your apology, but it changes nothing. We had our time, and it's over now. I've moved on. Olivia, please, I cut him off. No, Michael, this is my life, and I'm not going back to how things were. Take care of yourself. Hanging up, I felt a surge of empowerment. I had picked up the pieces of my shattered life, and I wasn't about to scatter them again. I was whole, on my own, and that was all I needed. Months had passed since the divorce finalized, and each day felt like a step forward. The journey hadn't been easy, but it was mine, and I cherished every bit of it. My life had taken a turn, but I was in control now, steering it in a direction that felt right. One afternoon, as I sat in my office crunching numbers, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my dad. Hey Liv, how about dinner tonight? Just the two of us. I smiled and quickly typed a response. Sounds great, Dad. See you tonight. Dinner with my dad was always special. He was the one who taught me to be strong, independent. We met at our favorite diner, a place that felt like home. As we settled into our booth, Dad looked at me with his kind eyes. How are you holding up, kiddo? I'm good, Dad. Really, I am. It's been tough, but I'm finding my way, I answered honestly. He nodded. You're strong, Olivia. Always have been. I'm proud of you. We talked about work, about life, about everything and nothing. It was comforting, familiar. Later that week, I was at the grocery store when I bumped into an old acquaintance, Emily. We had lost touch over the years, but seeing her felt like a pleasant surprise. Olivia, it's been ages. How are you? Emily greeted me with a warm smile. Hey, Emily, I'm doing well, thanks. Life's been interesting, I replied with a chuckle. We chatted for a while, catching up on old times. Before parting ways, Emily said, You seem different, Olivia. More at peace, I guess. I thought for a moment. I guess I am. It took a while, but I'm finally in a good place. The days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. I had reclaimed my life, my space. I indulged in hobbies I had long forgotten, spent time with friends, and found joy in the little things. One evening, as I sat on my porch, sipping tea and watching the sunset, my neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, walked by. She was an elderly lady, always kind and observant. Good evening, Olivia. You seem happy these days, she remarked, leaning on her walking stick. I smiled at her. Good evening, Mrs. Thompson. Yes, I am happy. It took some time, but I'm there. She nodded approvingly. Good for you, dear. Happiness is something we all deserve. As she walked away, I sat there, soaking in the calm of the evening. The journey had been long, filled with ups and downs. But as I looked back, I realized that every step, every stumble had led me here. I had lost a husband and a troublesome mother-in-law, but in return, I gained something far more precious, myself. I was complete, just as I was. A calculator in my head, and a heart resilient enough to start anew.